Welcome to Soundscape Books. You're listening to an exclusive audiobook recording of Draculescu, a gothic horror by Darian Cross. Like and subscribe for more content. Enjoy.
Chapter 1. The Lure of the Carpathian Vale. The wind, a thin, spectral keen, was the first thing Daniel Hughes truly registered. It whispered secrets through the ancient pines, a melody both mournful and alluring, as the sleek, black sedan navigated the final, serpentine ascent. Below, the sprawling valleys of the Carpathian Vale blurred into a tapestry of deep greens and brooding greys, already succumbing to the encroaching twilight. Daniel, a man whose life revolved around the precise geometry of auction catalogues and the hushed reverence of gallery spaces, felt a prickle of unease that had nothing to do with the precarious mountain road. It was the wilderness itself, vast and untamed, that felt alien to his meticulously curated existence. He adjusted the cuff of his charcoal suit, a nervous habit, and peered out the reinforced window. The light was fading fast, bleeding the vibrant hues from the landscape, leaving only stark silhouettes against a sky bruised with purple and bruised orange. Up ahead, nestled in a dramatic cleft of rock, Castelul Umbrelor finally emerged. It was not merely a castle, it was an apparition. Turrets, sharp as obsidian shards, clawed at the heavens. Walls, buttressed and scarred by centuries, plummeted into unseen depths. Yet, it wasn't crumbling. Instead, it possessed a formidable, almost arrogant restoration. Every gargoyle, every intricate stone carving, seemed to hum with a revitalized, if ancient, power. Gothic grandeur met an unnerving, almost futuristic, perfection. There was no gentle approach, no manicured gardens leading to its gates, only the sheer raw face of the mountain and the silent, watchful sentinel of the castle. "We are here, Mr. Hughes." The driver, a man of few words and fewer expressions, announced in heavily accented English, pulling the car to a smooth stop before massive, wrought-iron gates. They were open, as if expecting him, revealing a meticulously paved courtyard that gleamed under the burgeoning gloom. As Daniel stepped out, the chill in the air bit sharper than he expected, carrying the scent of pine, damp earth, and something else. Something ancient and metallic, like old coins or dried blood. The silence that followed the hum of the engine was absolute, profound. It swallowed the wind's whispers, leaving only the beat of his own heart. He glanced around, expecting groundskeepers, security, anyone. But there was no one. Just the towering walls of Castelul Umbrelor, silent and impossibly vast. Then, a flicker of movement by the castle's imposing main entrance. 3 figures emerged from the deep shadows of the archway, gliding rather than walking across the courtyard with an eerie synchronicity. They were women, strikingly beautiful, dressed in ensembles of dark, luxurious fabric that seemed to absorb the fading light. Their movements were fluid, graceful, almost ethereal, as if gravity held less sway over them. The first, Lyra, possessed a cascade of silver blonde hair that tumbled over one shoulder, framing a face of exquisite, almost porcelain, pallor. Her eyes, a startling glacial blue, fixed on Daniel with an intensity that made him momentarily forget to breathe. Beside her, Kaylin, with dark, lustrous curls and eyes like polished obsidian, held herself with an understated elegance, her gaze equally piercing, though tinged with a predatory curiosity. The third, Anya, had hair the color of flame and lips, the hue of crushed berries, her expression a subtle, knowing smile that never quite reached her unnervingly pale, emerald eyes. They stopped a respectful distance away, their silence profound. No smiles of welcome, no outstretched hands, just an unwavering, unsettling attentiveness. "Mr. Hughes." Lyra's voice was a low, melodic murmur, perfectly modulated, devoid of any discernible accent. "Welcome to Castelul Umbrelor. Lord Draculescu awaits you." Daniel, a man accustomed to the effusive greetings of gallery owners and the polite deference of Sotheby's clients, felt a disorienting shift in power dynamics. He was the esteemed expert, yet these women, Draculescu's assistants as the invitation had vaguely described, exuded an aura of quiet authority that demanded immediate, instinctive respect. Their beauty was undeniable, almost intimidating, their poise faultless. But it was their eyes, ancient and intelligent, that held him. They saw too much, understood too quickly. "Thank you," Daniel managed, his voice sounding a little too thin in the vast, silent space. He retrieved his attaché case from the back seat, the driver already having vanished into the driver's side of the car, as if eager to escape the courtyard's spell. "It's quite a journey." Kaylin stepped forward, her movement so fluid it seemed she simply materialized closer. "We trust your travels were comfortable, Mr. Hughes. Please, allow us." She gestured towards the main entrance, her hand, a delicate, pale thing, devoid of any adornment, save for perfectly manicured nails. There was no offer to take his case, merely an expectation that he would follow. Anya's lips curved slightly, her emerald eyes seeming to glint in the fading light. "Lord Draculescu is eager for your appraisal." The exchange was polite, formal, yet underscored by a coolness that bordered on the unnerving. Daniel found himself walking between Lyra and Kaylin, Anya trailing silently behind, their presence a palpable force. He was a professional, a man of logic and verifiable facts, but he couldn't shake the sensation that he was being guided not by humans, but by something else entirely. Their skin had an almost translucent quality, and their movements, so graceful, lacked the small, unconscious tells of human physicality. No fidgeting, no slight shifts of weight, no subtle blinks that broke their unwavering gazes. He dismissed it as an effect of the dim light, the altitude, and his own travel weariness. It was, after all, an extraordinary place. Darzi. The massive, carved oak doors swung open silently at Kaylin's touch, revealing a grand entrance hall that swallowed Daniel whole. It was a space designed to awe, to diminish. Soaring ceilings, lost in shadow, were adorned with intricate, centuries-old frescoes depicting mythological scenes and forgotten battles. Sunlight, what little remained, filtered through a vast, stained-glass rose window high above, casting fragmented jewels of color across the polished marble floor. But the ancient grandeur wasn't all. This was no dusty museum. Seamlessly integrated into the Gothic architecture were sleek, minimalist lighting fixtures that illuminated the space with a soft, artful glow. A contemporary sculpture of intertwined chrome and glass stood Sentinel in the center of the hall, its sharp angles a stark contrast to the flowing curves of an antique tapestry depicting a medieval hunt, yet somehow they coexisted in a harmonious, if unsettling dialogue. State-of-the-art security cameras, almost invisible, were discreetly embedded into the cornices. The scent of aged wood and beeswax mingled with something clean, almost sterile, like ozone. "Lord Draculescu has taken great care in preserving the castle's heritage," Lyra stated, her voice echoing softly in the vast space, while ensuring it meets the demands of modern living. "Indeed," Daniel murmured, genuinely impressed despite his growing disquiet. He was accustomed to the meticulous restoration of historical properties, but this was on another level. Every detail, from the hand-carved newel posts of the grand staircase to the almost imperceptible hum of climate control, spoke of immense wealth and an exacting, almost obsessive, vision. As they began their ascent of the sweeping central staircase, Daniel noticed the pervasive silence once more. Not a single servant was visible, no distant clatter from a kitchen, no murmur of conversation. The castle felt empty, save for the four of them, yet strangely alive. It was too quiet for such a vast estate. He'd expected at least a bustling staff, especially with such a high-profile visitor from Sotheby's. "Does Lord Draculescu maintain a small staff?" Daniel asked, turning to Kaelin, who walked a step behind him. Her obsidian eyes met his, unblinking. "Only those essential to the castle's operations, Mr. Hughes, and they are exceptionally discreet." His gaze drifted to Anya, who remained a silent, watchful presence a few paces back, her fiery hair a stark contrast to the somber tones of the hall. He noticed the same unnerving stillness in her, the lack of any casual shift of weight or stray gesture. It was as if they were perfectly posed sculptures, capable of movement, but choosing absolute rigidity when still. They moved through a labyrinth of hallways, each more opulent than the last. One corridor showcased a collection of Renaissance portraits, their subjects, eyes seeming to follow them. Another was lined with backlit display cases holding ancient artifacts, Roman coins, Dacian armlets, Byzantine icons. Yet another led to a soaring gallery, where abstract canvases, vibrant and explosive, commanded attention. The blend of eras, cultures and styles was masterful, a testament to Draculescu's eclectic taste and seemingly limitless resources. Daniel, the art expert, found himself intellectually stimulated, his professional instincts kicking in. This was a collection unlike any he had ever seen, a staggering testament to the owner's vision. But the subtle chill persisted, seeming to emanate not from the climate control, but from the very stones of the castle. He saw no dust, no sign of wear, only immaculate surfaces and perfectly arranged displays. It was almost too *perfect, like a stage set. As they passed a tall, unadorned archway, Daniel caught a glimpse of a vast library, shelves teeming with ancient tomes and modern hardcovers, bathed in the warm glow of concealed lighting. His professional curiosity was piqued. Lord Draculescu is truly a man of remarkable taste, and a formidable collector, it seems. Lyra, leading the way, simply nodded, a faint, almost imperceptible smile gracing her pale lips. "He has a profound appreciation for beauty, Mr. Hughes, in all its forms." Daniel absorbed this, allowing himself to be led deeper into the castle's embrace. He noticed, as they navigated a dimly lit passage, a series of intricately carved wooden panels. He reached out, his fingers tracing the cold, smooth grain of the wood. It depicted a winding vine, thorns clearly delineated, intertwining with something he couldn't quite discern in the shadows. He shook his head. Just his imagination. The castle was playing tricks on his senses. He dismissed the strange observations as the quirks of an isolated ancient dwelling and the natural effect of unfamiliar surroundings. The air might be a little too still, the women a little too poised, but he was here for art, for a collection that promised to rewrite sections of art history. His intellectual pride, his confidence in his own expertise, was a strong counterweight to any lingering unease. He was a professional, not some credulous tourist to be spooked by Gothic architecture. Still, a fleeting thought crossed his mind. He hadn't seen another human face since the driver, who had vanished as soon as he deposited Daniel. And the pervasive quiet, it really was quite absolute, like the castle itself was holding its breath. No. They finally arrived at a set of double doors crafted from dark, lacquered wood, inlaid with polished brass. Lyra pushed one open with an elegant flick of her wrist, revealing a space that was at once traditional and startlingly modern. It was a private study, or perhaps more accurately, a salon, designed for contemplation and discourse. The room was vast, dominated by a floor-to-ceiling window that offered a dizzying panoramic view of the darkening Carpathians. Below, the distant valley lights twinkled like scattered jewels, a world away. The walls were lined with custom-built shelves displaying an array of artifacts, ancient Greek pottery, Roman busts, delicate Chinese porcelain, and amidst them, holographic projections of digital art, swirling and evolving in soft, silent patterns. A grand fireplace, its mantelpiece adorned with a collection of intricate silver filigreed chess pieces, cast a warm, inviting glow into the room. In the center of this remarkable space, seated at a vast, dark wood desk, was Vladislav Draculescu. He rose as Daniel entered, a figure of effortless charm and impeccable breeding. He was taller than Daniel expected, with a lean, athletic build that spoke of latent power. His tailored suit was of an exquisite, almost imperceptible sheen, the color of midnight. His dark hair, meticulously styled, framed a face that was both handsome and striking. High cheekbones, a strong jawline, and eyes, dark and fathomless, that held an ancient, compelling intelligence. A faint, almost imperceptible smile played on his lips, hinting at secrets and amusement. "Mr. Hughes?" Draculescu's voice was deep, resonant and remarkably cultured, carrying a subtle, untraceable accent that only added to his allure. "A distinct pleasure. I trust your journey was not too arduous?" He extended a hand, long-fingered and surprisingly cool to the touch, yet firm. "Lord Draculescu," Daniel replied, taking the offered hand. He felt an odd jolt, a sensation not entirely unpleasant, as if a faint current passed between them. "The pleasure is all mine, and the journey, while long, was certainly scenic." Draculescu chuckled, a low, rich sound. "The mountains have a way of putting things into perspective, don't you agree? Reminding us of scale, of time." He gestured to a plush velvet armchair opposite his desk, which had been moved closer, creating an intimate conversational space. "Please, make yourself comfortable. My assistants will see to your luggage and ensure you are settled." Lyra, Kaelin, and Anya, who had stood silently by the door, nodded almost imperceptibly and withdrew, their departure as noiseless as their arrival. Daniel, now alone with Draculescu, felt a sudden, profound sense of ease wash over him, as if a great weight had been lifted. The subtle unease he had felt earlier simply dissolved, replaced by a surge of intellectual anticipation. Draculescu settled back into his own chair, his posture relaxed, yet radiating an undeniable authority. His gaze was direct, intelligent, making Daniel feel utterly seen, utterly understood. "Before we delve into the practicalities, Mr. Hughes, may I offer you a libation? I have a rather exceptional vintage of Romanian red. Or perhaps something stronger." "A red would be excellent, thank you," Daniel replied, surprised by his own relaxed tone. He usually preferred to maintain a more professional distance on first meetings, but Draculescu's charisma was disarming. With a discreet press of a button on his desk, a hidden panel slid open in the wall, revealing an array of crystal decanters and gleaming glasses. Draculescu personally poured 2 glasses of a dark ruby-red wine, the aroma rich with berries and oak. He handed one to Daniel. "To beauty, Mr. Hughes." Draculescu raised his glass, his eyes sparkling with a subtle intensity, "and to the pursuit of its timeless essence." "To beauty," Daniel echoed, taking a sip. The wine was exquisite, smooth as silk, warming him from the inside out. "I have followed your career with great interest," Draculescu began, leaning forward slightly, his voice a low, compelling murmur. "Your recent valuation of the de Beaumont collection in particular. A masterful dissection of provenance and artistic intent. Sotheby's is fortunate to have you." Daniel felt a blush of pleasure. Draculescu hadn't just glanced at his CV, he had clearly studied his work in detail. "That's very kind of you to say, Lord Draculescu. It was a fascinating project." "Indeed," Draculescu continued, his gaze never leaving Daniel's. "And that brings us, in a way, to the very heart of why you are here. My own collection, while perhaps less publicized, presents its own unique challenges and, I believe, unparalleled rewards." He paused, allowing the anticipation to build. "Art, Mr. Hughes, is more than mere aesthetic pleasure, wouldn't you agree? It is a dialogue with eternity, a whisper across centuries." Daniel found himself nodding instinctively. "Absolutely. A conduit to the human spirit, a reflection of its most profound desires and fears." It captures moments, emotions, beliefs, and preserves them, allows us to connect with minds long past. Draculescu's smile widened, a flicker of something ancient in his dark eyes. Precisely. And what interests me most, beyond the brushstrokes and the pigments, is the story. The character's life * imbued within the object, the artist's longing, the patron's obsession, the collector's devotion. Every piece holds a fragment of the soul that created it, that cherished it. He then gestured towards a concealed easel at the far end of the room, still shrouded by a velvet cloth. I wish to present to you as a prelude to the wider collection, a single piece, one that embodies this very essence. It has, for centuries, been uncatalogued, unknown to the wider world. Daniel felt a thrill, a professional surge of excitement that pushed all lingering apprehension from his mind. This was it. The reason he had journeyed halfway across the continent. A lost masterpiece. Draculescu rose, moving with a fluid grace that seemed to defy his imposing stature. He pulled the velvet cloth away with a flourish. The painting was small, no larger than a ledger book, yet it dominated the room. It was a portrait, exquisitely rendered, of a woman. Her features were ethereal, framed by a dark veil. Her eyes, almond-shaped and impossibly deep, held a melancholic wisdom that seemed to pierce Daniel's very soul. The brushwork was subtle, the colors rich and vibrant despite its apparent age. A single teardrop, perfectly caught on her cheek, seemed to shimmer with actual moisture. The light source within the painting was otherworldly, casting her face in a soft, internal glow. It is a late Renaissance piece, Daniel breathed, rising from his chair, drawn irresistibly closer. Possibly Venetian, but the style, it's unique. His fingers twitched, itching to examine the texture of the paint, the aged canvas. Indeed, Draculescu murmured, standing beside him, his presence warm and subtly intoxicating. Attributed, tentatively, to a lesser-known contemporary of Titian, lost to history. But I believe its true creator, its true purpose *, is far more profound than simple attribution. Look into her eyes, Mr. Hughes. What do you see? Daniel gazed into the painted woman's eyes. They were portals, pulling him in. He saw sorrow, yes, but also a fierce, unwavering spirit, a knowledge that transcended time. He felt a profound connection, an odd sense of understanding that bypassed intellectual analysis and went straight to something deeper, more primal. It was as if the woman in the portrait was speaking directly to him, her unspoken story unfolding in his mind. I see a soul, Daniel whispered, forgetting his professionalism, forgetting everything but the painting. A history, lived and felt, intensely. There's a longing there, and yet a strange serenity. Draculescu's hand rested lightly on Daniel's shoulder, a touch that sent a curious warmth through him. Precisely. She has witnessed much, endured much, and through her gaze you too become a participant in that journey. This is what I mean by the whispering art, Mr. Hughes. The power of a masterpiece to transcend its form, to speak directly to the deepest recesses of our being, to resonate with our own desires, our own hidden truths. Daniel felt a profound sense of recognition, of intellectual kinship with Draculescu. This was a man who understood art not as a commodity, but as a living, breathing entity, a conduit to something timeless. The conversation flowed effortlessly, seamlessly, from the painting to the broader philosophy of aesthetics, the nature of beauty, the intoxicating allure of history. Draculescu spoke with an eloquence and erudition that captivated Daniel completely. He quoted ancient philosophers, referenced obscure art historical texts, and wove together a narrative that pulled Daniel deeper and deeper into his worldview. Daniel's world had narrowed to the exquisite confines of Castelul Umbrelor, his mind a willing prisoner to Draculescu's hypnotic cadence. The ancient stones of the castle, the priceless art, the very air of the Carpathians seemed to conspire, weaving a spell that bound him tighter with every passing moment. The distant calls of London, the pressing demands of his career, even the faces of friends, all were dissolving into a fog, replaced by a profound yet unsettling sense of belonging. He was lost, utterly, in the labyrinthine beauty of the Carpathian Vale, oblivious to the insidious threads that had begun to stretch far beyond its shadowed peaks. But while Daniel drifted deeper into a waking dream, entangled by the past, the tendrils of Draculescu's influence were already reaching out, casting their own, modern reflection. Miles away, under the glittering, indifferent lights of a distant city, other lives were about to be drawn into the web. A different kind of mirror, dark and alluring, waited to reveal truths that had long been hidden, and freedom would soon prove a fragile, dangerous illusion. The true lure, it seemed, was not just in the ancient, veiled mountains, but in the obsidian depths of a world far too close to home. Chapter 2. Whispers in the Obsidian Mirror. The days since Daniel's arrival at Castelul Umbrelor had ceased to be distinct. Hours melted into an endless, opulent twilight, each conversation with Lord Draculescu a deeper plunge into an intoxicating ocean of philosophy and art. The Carpathian Vale had indeed become his world, a silken cage from which the whispers of London, of Sotheby's, of his very past, seemed utterly irrelevant. He made no attempts to call out, the very notion fading like a forgotten dream, as the castle's silence swallowed all ambition, leaving only the profound resonance of Draculescu's words and the melancholic beauty of the whispering art. Yet even as Daniel surrendered to the ancient lure of the mountains, a different kind of echo was beginning to stir, far from the castle's shadowed peaks. In the glittering indifference of a distant city, whispers were already gathering around the cold, obsidian depths of a mirror that showed not history, but a terrifying future. My Churstamo twos. The air in Castelul Umbrelor carried a scent Daniel had come to associate with eternal calm, a subtle blend of ancient stone, polished wood, and something indefinably sweet, like dried rose petals left in a sealed chamber for a century. Time, once a relentless ticker in his London life, had here become a languid river, its currents barely perceptible. He awoke not to the precise chime of an alarm, but to the gentle, filtered light that always seemed to hover between dawn and dusk, bathing his luxurious suite in a perpetual golden glow. Breakfast, a delicate repast of exotic fruits and rich coffee, would appear silently, delivered by one of the three women, Lyra, Kaelin, or Anya, who moved through the castle like silent, graceful shadows. Their beauty, initially startling, now felt as natural and essential as the castle's very architecture. Their piercing gazes a part of the profound, unblinking stillness of this place. Days blurred into a seamless tapestry of deep, sprawling conversations with Draculescu. They would sit in the grand study, the fireplace casting dancing shadows that seemed to breathe life into the antique tapestries, or wander through the meticulously curated galleries. Draculescu's voice, a low, resonant baritone, was a constant, soothing balm. He spoke not merely of art, but of existence, of the fleeting nature of human endeavor versus the enduring spirit of creation. To truly appreciate art, Daniel, Draculescu had mused one afternoon, gesturing towards a vast, allegorical canvas, is to understand that it is a rebellion against the perishable. Every stroke, every carved line, every sculpted form, is a defiant cry into the void, a demand for immortality. Daniel, sipping from a goblet of ruby-red wine, felt a profound connection to these words, as if they articulated a truth he had always known, but never been able to voice. His life at Sotheby's, once so meticulously ordered and demanding, now felt like a pale imitation of purpose. What was the value of appraising a painting for its market price, when here he was being shown its soul? The late Renaissance portrait, the whispering art, remained a profound focal point. He spent hours before it, its melancholic wisdom drawing him deeper into its silent dialogue. He no longer sought to analyze its provenance or its technique. He simply felt it, letting its profound spiritual resonance wash over him. A fleeting memory, like a faint scent of rain on dry earth, sometimes surfaced. The buzzing of his phone, emails awaiting reply, a flight back to London. Once, roused by a pang of residual habit, he had reached for his sleek, modern smartphone, a stark alien object in the ancient opulence of his suite. The screen flickered to life, displaying a cascade of unread messages and missed calls. He had scrolled through them, a distant curiosity replacing any sense of urgency. Colleagues, friends, his London life, they seemed to belong to a different man, a smaller man, concerned with trivialities like deadlines and appointments. He pressed the call button for his office number, half expecting, half not caring. The familiar chime of a failed connection echoed, "No service." He tried again, then a third time, with the same result. The message brought no frustration, no alarm. Instead, it felt like an affirmation. The Carpathian Vale had indeed enveloped him completely, severing the last tendrils connecting him to a world that no longer held any true meaning. Here, with Draculescu, amidst the eternal beauty of the art and the profound depths of their conversations, he felt truly alive, truly seen. The subtle, almost imperceptible erosion of his will continued, a slow, intoxicating surrender that felt not like loss, but like liberation. The assistants, always watchful, always attentive, ensured his comfort was absolute, his needs anticipated before he could even form them. There were no demands, no expectations, only the pervasive gentle hum of the castle, pulling him deeper into its endless embrace. Thousands of miles away, in the bustling, indifferent heart of London, a different kind of urgency was building. Sofia Vasile, in her late 20s, lean and athletic with sharp, intelligent dark eyes, stared at her phone screen, the blue light reflecting in her practical, dark bob. 3 missed calls from her, 1 vague text from Camilla. "Just needed to get away, Sof. Found a new truth. Don't worry." "Don't worry," Sofia muttered to the empty air of her modern, functional apartment. "That's rich." Her fingers drummed against the cool glass of her phone. This wasn't like Camilla. Her best friend, usually a whirlwind of creative energy and emotional transparency, had become increasingly elusive over the past few weeks. It had started subtly, a missed brunch, a cancelled yoga class, a sudden disinterest in their usual late-night chats. Then had come the shift in her appearance, an almost ethereal glow that was beautiful but unsettling, followed by the cryptic remarks. Sofia tried Camilla's number again, for the 5th time that evening. It went straight to voicemail. "Camilla, it's me again," Sofia began, her voice betraying a hint of forced calm. "Look, I'm getting worried. You're not returning my calls, and those texts. New truth? What is that supposed to mean? You've been so different since you started going to the Obsidian Mirror Club. It's not just a club, is it? Something's happening, and I need you to talk to me. Just call me back, okay? Please." She ended the call, a knot tightening in her stomach. She walked over to her laptop, pulling up her notes for an article on human trafficking she was investigating. The cold facts, the stark data, usually brought her focus, a sense of purpose. But tonight, they felt distant, overshadowed by a more personal, insidious unease. Her journalistic instincts, usually reserved for the larger injustices of the world, were now screaming about her friend. Camilla's fascination with the Obsidian Mirror had begun about a month ago. She'd gone with some new acquaintances, then had been drawn back, seemingly compelled. She'd described it as more than a club, a place of enlightenment and unparalleled beauty. Sofia had dismissed it initially as typical London club hype, but Camilla's subsequent changes had been too profound to ignore. Her once vibrant, mischievous eyes now held a distant, almost serene quality that Sofia found deeply troubling. She'd lost weight, not in an unhealthy way, but as if she were shedding something, becoming more translucent. Her laughter, once boisterous, was now a quiet, knowing smile. The most disturbing aspect was Camilla's growing detachment. Conversations became one-sided, Camilla offering only vague affirmations or enigmatic statements about shedding the mundane and embracing true freedom. She spoke of Draculescu, the club's owner, with an almost reverent awe, describing him as a visionary, a patron of beauty and a philosophical guide. Sofia sighed, running a hand through her hair. She'd tried to be patient, to respect Camilla's space, but this was beyond a mere phase. Camilla was slipping away, and Sofia felt a chilling premonition that something far more sinister than a simple party scene was at play. She opened a new browser tab and typed the Obsidian Mirror London into the search bar. The sleek, dark facade of the club, all reflective glass and understated neon, appeared on her screen. She scrolled through a few breathless reviews, then paused, her gaze lingering on a photo of the club's interior. Vast obsidian-like surfaces, low, pulsing lights, and a crowd that looked less like clubgoers and more like figures in a tableau. This wasn't just concern anymore. This was a growing conviction that something was profoundly wrong, and as a journalist, and more importantly, as Camilla's friend, Sofia knew she couldn't stand by. She had to see it for herself. Oh, asterisk. The bass note hit Sofia first, a low, resonant thrum that vibrated through the pavement even before she reached the entrance. The Obsidian Mirror was true to its name, a towering, almost seamless edifice of dark, reflective glass that swallowed the harsh city lights, returning them as distorted, sensual blurs. A discreet velvet rope, manned by a bouncer whose eyes seemed to miss nothing, guarded the entrance. Sofia, dressed in dark jeans, a practical jacket and a plain top, felt distinctly underdressed for the opulent scene unfolding around her, but her objective wasn't to impress. It was to observe. Inside, the club was a sensory immersion. The air, cool and faintly perfumed, swirled around her. Low, pulsing lights, mostly deep blues and violets, cast long, dancing shadows that seemed to reshape the space with every beat of the curated, atmospheric house music. The interior was a labyrinth of mirrored surfaces, walls, columns, even parts of the ceiling, creating endless shimmering reflections that disoriented as much as they mesmerized. There were no harsh angles, no jarring flashes. Everything flowed, a seamless dark river of light and sound. It felt less like a nightclub and more like a carefully constructed, multi-sensory art installation. Sofia moved through the crowd, her journalist's eye immediately scanning for details. The patrons were uniformly beautiful, stylish, radiating an aura of effortless wealth. But it wasn't just their designer clothes or their perfectly sculpted features that caught her attention. It was their demeanor. Many seemed to drift rather than walk, their movements almost languid. Their eyes, though often fixed on the dance floor or on some distant unseen point, lacked the usual sparkle of intoxication or excitement. There was a quietness to them, an unnerving serenity that bordered on the vacant. Conversations, when they happened, were hushed, often punctuated by slow, almost beatific smiles. It was as if they were all connected to some shared internal rhythm, oblivious to the world outside the club's dark embrace. A trance-like state, Sofia thought, filing the observation away. The staff were equally striking. They moved with an almost preternatural grace, their dark uniforms accentuating their lean frames. Their faces were beautiful, composed, and their eyes held an unsettling attentiveness, constantly sweeping the room, yet somehow never quite meeting anyone's gaze directly. They were efficient, silent, like highly refined automatons, catering to every unspoken need without the usual bustling energy of a busy bar. Sofia felt an odd prickle on the back of her neck, a sensation that she herself was being observed, assessed. She reached the main bar, its surface a long obsidian slab that reflected the shifting lights like liquid mercury. Her gaze continued to sweep the club, searching for a familiar face. And then, she saw her. Camilla. She was standing near one of the floor-to-ceiling mirrored columns, a small group of equally ethereal-looking individuals around her. Sofia's breath caught in her throat. Camilla looked stunning. Her usually warm auburn hair seemed to shimmer under the low lights, framing a face that was radiant, almost luminous. She was wearing a dress Sofia had never seen before, a creation of dark, flowing silk that seemed to cling to her new, slender form, highlighting a delicate collarbone and bare shoulders. But it was her eyes that truly seized Sofia's attention. They were wide, brilliant, yet utterly devoid of the familiar spark, the playful mischief, the fierce intelligence that had defined Camilla Jensen. They were like deep, still pools, reflecting only the club's mesmerizing lights, holding an unnerving, distant gaze. Sofia felt a surge of adrenaline, mixed with a chilling dread. "Camilla," she called out, pushing through the crowd, her voice a little louder than she intended, amidst the hushed hum of the club. Camilla turned, slowly, her head tilting slightly. A faint, almost beatific smile touched her lips, but it didn't reach her eyes. Her gaze slid over Sofia, lingering for a fraction of a second, before moving on, as if she were looking at a stranger, a ghost. There was a flicker of recognition, perhaps, a brief, almost imperceptible softening around the edges of her mouth, but it vanished as quickly as it appeared. It was replaced by that same unnerving serenity, a profound, unbreachable distance. She looked through Sofia, not at her, as if Sofia were merely another indistinct reflection in the Obsidian mirror, rather than her closest friend. Sofia stood amidst the pulsating darkness of the Obsidian mirror, the thrum of the bass, a counterpoint to the racing beat of her heart. Camilla was lost, yes, but not forever. Not if Sofia had anything to say about it. The image of her friend's vacant gaze, those unnervingly bright eyes, was seared into her mind, a terrible reminder of the insidious grip Draculescu's new path had taken. Fear still gnawed, a cold serpent in her gut, but beneath it, a fire ignited, a journalistic instinct sharpened by a friend's abduction by an idea. She wouldn't just unravel this disturbing truth, she would rip it apart, starting with a direct confrontation at Camilla's apartment, where the real battle for her friend's soul would surely begin. But even as that resolve hardened, a chilling premonition settled over her. The whispers around the Obsidian mirror were not isolated to Camilla. Daniel Hughes's unexplained silence, the strange fleeting encounters with other devotees, they were all pieces of a much larger, more sinister tapestry being woven, perhaps, across the misty peaks of the Carpathian Vale. Camilla's hollow shell was merely the visible symptom of a profound sickness. Sofia knew, with a certainty that both thrilled and terrified her, that understanding the disease meant understanding the physician, Vladislav Draculescu, and if uncovering his secrets meant delving into the shadows where others had vanished, then so be it. The fight for Camilla had just become a hunt for the truth, no matter how dark or dangerous that truth might prove to be. Chapter 3. The Shadow of a Friend. The pale morning light did little to dispel the gloom that clung to Camilla's apartment building the next day. Every step up the worn Victorian staircase was a leaden reminder of the night before, of the vacant gaze of her oldest friend. Sofia knocked, her knuckles stinging against the familiar wood, a cold resolve replacing the fear that had gnawed at her gut. This was the first battle, not in the hypnotic darkness of a club, but in the harsh, undeniable reality of a quiet London flat, where the shadow of Draculescu had truly taken root in Camilla's soul. The door creaked open, revealing Camilla Jensen, but it was not truly Camilla. The woman who stood there was a ghost of her former vibrant self. Her normally healthy, sun-kissed complexion had faded to a waxy pallor, making the fine network of veins beneath her skin eerily visible. Her usually lively, expressive eyes, once the color of warm honey, were now unnervingly bright, wide and still, like deep, unblinking pools reflecting an invisible light. They seemed to hold a vast, serene emptiness that chilled Sofia to the bone. Camilla's lean, athletic frame had become gaunt. Her clothes, A silk robe Sofia recognized as a birthday gift hung loosely, almost flapping on her. A faint, almost sickly sweet perfume, unfamiliar and cloying, clung to her. The air in the apartment itself was stale, heavy, with the scent of unwashed dishes and something metallic, like old pennies. "Camilla," Sofia managed, her voice tight, a tremor she fought to suppress. "I was worried. You weren't yourself last night." Camilla offered a slow, beatific smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. It was a smile Sofia had seen before, on cult members, on those utterly lost in an ideology, their true selves buried under layers of adopted dogma. "Sofia, my dearest friend, you look agitated, unsettled." Her voice, once a vibrant alto, was now a low, even murmur, devoid of inflection. "Please, come in. The city's noise, it's quite discordant, isn't it?" Sofia stepped into the apartment, her journalistic eye instantly cataloguing the neglect. Dust motes danced in the slivers of sunlight that pierced the grimy windows. A stack of unread mail lay on the hall table, bills and circulars from a life Camilla no longer seemed to inhabit. The living room, once a cozy sanctuary filled with books and plants, was now sparse. A half-eaten bowl of cereal sat on a coffee table next to a teetering pile of glossy, unfamiliar pamphlets, all depicting ancient castles and serene, smiling faces. "Camilla, what's going on?" Sofia pressed, turning to face her. You're so thin. And last night, you didn't even recognize me, you just stared through me." Camilla glided rather than walked, moving with an unnatural grace towards a window, gazing out at the familiar London street as if seeing it for the first time, or perhaps for the last. "Recognition, Sofia, is merely a construct of the past. The self as we perceive it is an illusion. Lord Draculescu has shown me the true path, the liberation from such mundane attachments." She turned, her unnervingly bright eyes fixing on Sofia. "He understands. He sees beyond the ephemeral, into the heart of eternity." Sofia felt a cold dread clench in her stomach. "Eternity? Camilla, he's a nightclub owner. He runs the Obsidian Mirror. And what about your job, your family, your life here?" Camilla chuckled, a sound like dry leaves skittering across pavement. "My life here was merely a prelude, a preparation. Lord Draculescu's vision, it transcends such limitations. He offers a renewal, a resculpting of the self. Have you not felt the pull of it, Sofia, the quiet yearning for something more?" "I felt the pull of a dark, empty club filled with people who looked like they were sleepwalking," Sofia retorted, her voice hardening. "I felt the pull of my best friend looking at me like I was a stranger. This isn't renewal, Camilla. This is something sinister." Camilla's serene expression didn't waver. "You speak from a place of limited understanding, my dear. The world you inhabit, it thrives on chaos, on decline. Lord Draculescu offers a sanctuary, a place where youth is not merely preserved but extended, where the soul can truly blossom, unfettered by the burdens of time." She paused, a glint of something akin to pity entering her bright eyes. "He speaks of eternal youth, not as a fantasy, Sofia, but as a tangible reality. A new path, a way to transcend the decay that binds us all." Sofia's heart pounded. Eternal youth? This sounded like the rhetoric of a cult, plain and simple. And Camilla was deep in it. "Who is this Draculescu, really? What has he done to you?" A slow smile, utterly devoid of warmth, spread across Camilla's pale face. "He has offered me an invitation. An opportunity for further studies," he called it, "to truly immerse myself in his teachings. In the Carpathian Vale, Sofia. Imagine. A place where the ancient wisdom meets the potential of the future." Her voice dropped to a conspiratorial whisper, yet still retained its eerie flatness. "He's restoring a castle there, you know. Castelul Umbrelor. A place steeped in history. A place where the past and the future converge." He says I am ready to join the chosen few. The Carpathian Vale. Castellul Umbrelor. Daniel Hughes's trip to appraise art. It all clicked into place with sickening clarity. This wasn't just a London problem. This was a deeper, wider web. And Camilla was about to be pulled further into its dark center. Sofia felt a fresh wave of panic, quickly transmuted into a cold, fierce resolve. She wouldn't lose Camilla to this. Not completely. Camilla, Sofia said, her voice strained but firm, I'm not going to let you do this. Whatever he's promised you, it's a lie. You're not yourself. You're a shadow of the vibrant, intelligent woman I know. Camilla merely shook her head, her unnervingly bright eyes reflecting the dust motes in the air. The shadow, my dear, is what I was before. Now I am becoming more. You should consider joining us, Sofia, before it's too late. Before the world's decay consumes you too. Sofia stared at her friend, a profound sense of loss swirling inside her, battling with a rising tide of fury. Camilla was gone, at least for now. But Sofia wasn't giving up. She turned and walked out, the heavy silence of Camilla's apartment pressing on her back. The door clicked shut, a final, chilling sound. This wasn't just about saving Camilla anymore. It was about understanding what had taken her, and stopping it from taking anyone else. No. The quiet hum of Sofia's laptop was a familiar comfort, a rhythmic counterpoint to the storm raging inside her. Back in her own London apartment, a space that reflected her professional, no-nonsense approach, functional, and filled with organized stacks of research, though currently a little more cluttered than usual. She attacked her keyboard with the precision of a seasoned investigator. The image of Camilla's hollowed eyes and vacant smile was burned into her mind, a relentless goad pushing her forward. Vladislav Draculescu, she muttered, typing his name into the search engine. Her fingers flew across the keys, opening multiple tabs, cross-referencing, dissecting. His public image was impeccable, a meticulously crafted facade. The search results painted a picture of a philanthropic art patron, a visionary entrepreneur, a restorer of historical landmarks. His elegant website, the Carpathian Vale Collective, was a masterclass in sophisticated branding. High-resolution images showcased him as a charismatic figure, often photographed in well-tailored suits, a thoughtful expression on his face as he gestured towards an ancient fresco or a modern sculpture. There were articles in prestigious art journals praising his commitment to preserving Eastern European heritage, particularly his magnificent restoration of Castellul Umbrelor, depicted as a blend of ancient Gothic grandeur and cutting-edge ecological sustainability. He was lauded for his efforts in cultural exchange, for bridging the gap between historical wealth and contemporary innovation. His chain of elite nightclubs, the Obsidian Mirror, was presented as a pinnacle of nocturnal luxury, a curated experience for the discerning elite, where art, music, and social connection intertwined seamlessly. Sofia saw photos of sleek, dark interiors, shimmering with reflective surfaces, just as she'd witnessed. The accompanying text spoke of sensory transcendence and elevated consciousness, phrases that now sounded chillingly familiar, echoing Camilla's vacant pronouncements. Right? Sofia mumbled, her dark, intelligent eyes narrowed, scanning for cracks in the polished veneer. Too perfect. She started digging deeper, away from the glossy PR, into less publicized corners of the internet. Forum discussions, local news archives, police blotters. Her fingers worked with practiced ease, refining search terms, pulling up obscure reports. The first hint of something truly disturbing came when she began cross-referencing Draculescu's various properties and events with missing persons reports. It started subtly, isolated incidents at first. A young artist, last seen at a gallery opening hosted by Draculescu in Prague, officially logged as a runaway. A successful stockbroker, who had frequented the Obsidian Mirror in Budapest, his disappearance attributed to a sudden, unexplained bout of drug addiction by authorities, despite no prior history. Then the pattern emerged, stark and undeniable. a significant spike in disappearances, primarily among young, successful, and often artistically inclined individuals, across various Eastern European cities where Draculescu owned properties or hosted events. London wasn't exempt. She found 2 similar cases linked to the Obsidian mirror within the past year alone. The official explanations were depressingly similar. Voluntary departure, travel abroad without notifying family, possible drug involvement. There were no suspicious circumstances, no forced entries, no bodies. Just people, seemingly healthy and well-adjusted, vanishing into thin air after encountering the Draculescu empire. Online forums, however, told a different story. Worried family members, frustrated friends, even a few disgruntled former employees, all sharing a common, unsettling thread. The sudden radical change in personality, the obsessive focus on Draculescu, or the Carpathian Vale, the strange, detached contentment before they simply evaporated. Sofia felt a chill that had nothing to do with her London apartment's drafts. This wasn't a random collection of unfortunate events. This was a deliberate, organized campaign. Draculescu wasn't just charming people, he was preying on them. And Camilla was next. The meticulously curated public image was a sophisticated, impenetrable shield designed to deflect suspicion, to make any investigation seem like the ravings of a conspiracy theorist. Her gut twisted. Daniel Hughes, the art expert from Sotheby's. He'd gone to the Castelloul Umbrelor. He was exactly the kind of person Draculescu seemed to target. Intelligent, cultured, with an appreciation for the esoteric. He was likely already caught in this same insidious web. Which Darcy. The next morning, armed with a fresh cup of strong coffee and a renewed sense of urgency, Sofia placed a call to Sotheby's London office. She navigated the automated system, her tone professional but insistent, until she was connected to a colleague in the Old Masters department. "Hello, my name is Sofia Vasile," she began, choosing her words carefully. "I'm a freelance journalist, and I'm working on a piece about art patronage in Eastern Europe. I was hoping to speak with Daniel Hughes about his recent appraisal trip to the Carpathian Vale." There was a slight pause on the other end, a rustle of papers. "Ah, Daniel, yes, quite the trip, that one." The voice was a pleasant, upper-class English accent, slightly harried. "I'm afraid Mr. Hughes isn't currently available. He hasn't been in the office for a while now." Sofia's grip tightened on the phone. "Oh, has he extended his stay? I understood the appraisal was for a limited period." "Limited? With Lord Draculescu?" The colleague chuckled, a dry, knowing sound. "My dear, when Daniel gets his teeth into a truly fascinating collection, he can be quite dedicated. He tends to lose all track of time. We haven't heard from him since he first reported his safe arrival, actually. Not unusual for Daniel, I assure you. He's rather eccentric, you see. Prone to extended research trips, without much notice. Probably on some idyllic retreat sketching or poring over forgotten manuscripts. Or perhaps an extended holiday." "So, no contact at all?" Sofia pressed, ignoring the colleague's dismissive reassurances. "No emails, no calls, no check-ins with Sotheby's regarding the collection?" Another, longer pause. "Well, no, not directly. We assumed Lord Draculescu's estate, being rather remote, might have spotty communication, but we're confident he's quite well. Daniel can be rather single-minded, as I said. He'll resurface eventually, probably with some fascinating anecdote about a long-lost Caravaggio or a forgotten alchemical text. Always does." The silence from official channels was a deafening confirmation. The answers she sought would never be found in police reports or polite inquiries to auction houses. This wasn't a case for conventional investigation, but for something whispered in hushed tones, something that danced on the periphery of accepted reality. Sofia's scientific mind rebelled against the notion, yet her gut screamed the truth. Draculescu was no mere criminal, and Camilla's disappearance was far from accidental. He was a predator of a different stripe, and to hunt him, she would need a guide into the darkness. The next morning found her hunched over her laptop, scrolling through obscure forums and academic papers that veered sharply from the mainstream. It was there, amidst the ramblings of fringe theorists and the hushed warnings of forgotten lore, that a faint, cryptic echo promised a different kind of expertise. She had dismissed such things her entire life, but now, with Camilla's life hanging in the balance, Sofia would follow any shadow, no matter how outlandish, if it promised to cast light on the abyss Draculescu had opened. She would find someone who understood the language of shadows, even if it meant stepping entirely out of her own. Chapter 4. An Unconventional Consultant. The next morning, Sofia had envisioned, dedicated to a cold scientific hunt, had stretched into several frustrating days of dead ends. Conventional inquiries evaporated into dismissive silence, further solidifying her resolve to disregard all accepted reality. It was buried deep within a forgotten corner of the internet, a forum dedicated to unexplained phenomena and forgotten lore, that a name finally surfaced, almost a murmur against the digital static: Dr. Thomas Helmuth, an unconventional consultant who allegedly understood the language of shadows. The initial days following her harrowing encounter with Camilla and the chilling confirmation of Daniel Hughes's disappearance had been a maelstrom of furious, futile effort. Sofia, a journalist honed by years of meticulously sifting through data and navigating bureaucracy, had approached the problem with her usual clinical precision. She'd contacted the Metropolitan Police, laying out her concerns about Camilla, the suspicious club, Draculescu's widespread influence, and the disturbing pattern of disappearances. They listened politely, but their questions were laced with condescension. "Ms. Vasile, it sounds like your friend is an adult exercising her free will. People experiment, New Age retreats, spiritual communes, eternal youth is a common hook. As for the disappearances, these are often, well, let's be frank, drug-related, or simply individuals choosing to drop out." The uniform voice on the other end of the line had been flat, dismissive, categorizing Camilla's transformation as a trace, lifestyle choice, and Draculescu's operations as a trendy, if slightly exclusive, business venture. They recommended she encourage Camilla to seek therapy. She'd then called every social services agency she could think of, her voice tight with suppressed rage. Each call met the same wall of indifference, the same bureaucratic jargon, the same insistence on tangible evidence of coercion, something more than a friend's unsettling serenity and a club's hypnotic allure. She even tried a few private investigators, but their eyes glazed over at the mention of ancient castles, enigmatic art patrons, and the vaguely defined sense of dread that permeated her account. "We deal in facts, Ms. Vasile, not feelings." Returning to her apartment each evening, the sleek, minimalist space, usually a sanctuary, now felt like a cage. The city outside, typically a source of vibrant energy, seemed to mock her with its relentless normalcy. How could everyone be so blind? How could the system be so utterly incapable of grasping the subtle, insidious horror she was witnessing? Camilla wasn't just a runaway or a drug addict. She was gone asterisk, her essence hollowed out, her soul replaced by an eerie, placid void. And Daniel was simply a name on a missing persons list that no one cared to connect to a pattern. Sofia's laptop became an extension of her frustration, its screen her battlefield. She abandoned the mainstream news sites, the official reports, the well-trodden paths. She burrowed deeper into the internet's dark corners, guided by keywords like unexplained disappearances Eastern Europe, celebrity cults, hypnotic influence social media. She sifted through conspiracy theories, debunked myths, and frantic pleas from desperate relatives. It was a digital swamp, filled with more noise than signal, but Sofia was a tireless hunter. Then she found it. A thread, buried beneath layers of sensationalism about alien abductions and Bigfoot sightings, titled The Modern Siren Song, A New Breed of Predator. The initial posts were familiar. Stories of loved ones changed, lost to charismatic leaders, leaving behind perfectly normal lives for ethereal promises. But then, a distinct pattern emerged, focusing on specific locales in Eastern Europe, on art circles and elite clubs, on a curious radiance described in the victims. And within that thread, several users, cautiously, tentatively, began to mention a name. You know, Dr. Helmuth at Interpol consults on these cases sometimes. He has unconventional theories. Helmuth? The anthropology professor? He thinks outside the box, but even he might struggle with this. His work on adapted cultic phenomena is fascinating. He's the only one who doesn't just dismiss it as another drug ring. The name, Dr. Thomas Helmuth, echoed across several obscure posts. It was enough. Sofia, despite her deeply ingrained skepticism, a journalist's essential armor, felt a flicker of something she hadn't felt in days: hope. Her journalistic instinct, trained to spot the faint scent of truth amidst a mountain of falsehoods, told her there was something here. A lone unconventional voice in the wilderness of official denial. She found his professional website, sparse but academic, listing his affiliation with Interpol as a consultant on cults and unusual social phenomena. The phrase resonated. She didn't know what she expected, but the conventional world had failed her. It was time to venture into the shadows. The late afternoon sun, already weak and watery, cast long, distorted shadows down a narrow, cobbled lane in an older, less polished part of London. Sofia's GPS had guided her away from the gleaming glass towers and bustling commercial districts into a labyrinth of Victorian brickwork, where independent bookstores snuggled beside arcane antique shops, and the scent of old paper mingled with brewing coffee. The air was damp, carrying the faint, earthy smell of rain that had fallen earlier. The building she sought was a narrow, four-story structure, its red bricks blackened by a century of soot, its bay windows gazing out with a slightly melancholic air. It was unassuming, bordering on dilapidated, with peeling paint around the ornate, heavy wooden door and window boxes that seemed to have forgotten their purpose. It felt ancient, out of step with the relentless churn of modern London, and Sofia, in her sharp modern attire, felt conspicuously so. Above the entrance, a small, discreet brass plaque, tarnished with age, proudly declared, Carlaface, Carl Associates, Carles, anthropological and historical consultation. Sofia squinted at it, a sardonic smile playing on her lips. Anthropological and historical consultation. It sounded like something out of a period drama, not a haven for an Interpol consultant tackling cutting-edge human trafficking, or whatever Draculescu was truly involved in. Her rational mind screamed, this is a waste of time. He's probably a harmless eccentric, a crank who collects dusty scrolls and weaves elaborate theories from forgotten myths. Yet, the cryptic online whispers, the desperation, and the absolute failure of every other avenue had brought her here. She took a deep breath, pushing aside her skepticism for just a little longer, and pressed the doorbell. It chimed with a surprisingly delicate, old-fashioned trill. Darcy. The sound of shuffling footsteps preceded the slow creak of the door. Seta. It opened to reveal not a polished receptionist or a stern security guard, but a man of indeterminate age, somewhere in his late 50s, early 60s, framed by an explosion of unruly gray hair and a kindly, slightly bewildered expression. He was wearing a tweed jacket that looked as if it had been inherited, its elbows patched, over a faded plaid shirt. A pair of spectacles sat low on his nose, amplifying his large, warm eyes. He smelled faintly of pipe tobacco and old books. "Miss Vasile?" he asked, his voice a gentle rumble, tinged with a faint, unplaceable accent. "Do come in. I wasn't expecting you quite so promptly. Apologies for the organized chaos." He gestured vaguely behind him, ushering her into a narrow hallway crammed with precarious stacks of books and papers. Sofia stepped into the antechamber, the heavy door thudding softly behind her, cutting off the city's murmur. The hallway led directly into what must have been the living room of the old house, now transformed into Dr. Helmuth's study. And organized chaos was an understatement. Books lined every wall, floor to ceiling, overflowing onto every available surface. They were stacked in tottering towers on antique side tables, piled high on the worn Persian rug, and even served as makeshift stands for an ancient globe and a collection of what looked like ethnographic artifacts. A carved wooden mask, a ceremonial dagger, a piece of ancient pottery. A strong, comforting scent of leather, dust, and tea permeated the air. Despite the clutter, there was an order to it, a sense of a mind deeply immersed in its own intellectual world. A massive mahogany desk dominated the center of the room, littered with more books, a well-used laptop, and several open notebooks filled with neat, spidery handwriting. Dr. Helmuth gestured towards a surprisingly comfortable-looking armchair, almost swallowed by a mountain of academic journals. "Please, make yourself comfortable. Tea, or something stronger, perhaps?" "Tea would be lovely, thank you," Sofia replied, still absorbing the atmosphere. She sat down, carefully displacing a heavy tome on comparative mythology. Thomas Helmuth bustled over to an antique kettle on a small side table, clearly a well-practiced ritual. "I've read your email," he said, pouring boiling water into two mismatched ceramic mugs. "Concerns about a friend, a nightclub, a charismatic figure. Very intriguing, Ms. Vasily. As a journalist, I imagine you've already done a considerable amount of legwork. Please, tell me everything, from the beginning. No detail is too small, no observation too insignificant." He handed her a steaming mug, its warmth a welcome contrast to the chill in her bones. He settled into a creaking leather chair opposite her, a fresh notebook and fountain pen at the ready, his expression one of calm, patient attention. Sofia took a fortifying sip of tea and began. She spoke methodically, her journalistic training kicking in. She started with Camilla, describing her friend's vibrant personality, her sudden withdrawal, the unsettling radiance, the vacant eyes. She detailed the apartment's neglect, the sickly sweet metallic scent. She recounted Camilla's flat, indoctrinated voice, her talk of Lord Draculescu's teachings, and eternal youth, the invitation to Castellul Umbrella. She moved on to her visit to the Obsidian mirror, describing its sensory overload, the unnerving serenity of the patrons, Camilla's chilling lack of recognition. She then laid out her meticulous research on Draculescu, his impeccable public image, his philanthropy, his clubs, the restoration of the castle. Then, the darker thread, the disturbing spike in disappearances of young, successful individuals across Eastern European cities, the dismissive official explanations. Finally, she recounted her call to Sotheby's, the casual confirmation of Daniel Hughes's disappearance from Castellul Umbrella. As she spoke, Thomas Helmuth listened intently, his gaze unwavering. He didn't interrupt, didn't offer judgment, only occasionally making a note with his fountain pen, a soft scratching sound in the quiet room. His presence was one of profound, focused calm, making Sofia feel for the first time in days that she was being truly heard, truly believed. When she finished, the silence stretched, punctuated only by the soft tick of an old grandfather clock in the corner. Thomas Steeple leaned back, his fingers steepled under his chin, his eyes thoughtful. "A powerful and disturbing account, Miss Vasily," he said finally, his voice still calm, but with an underlying current of gravity. "You are an excellent observer, and your investigative instincts are very sharp indeed." He paused, taking a slow breath. "Let's begin with what we can readily explain within the framework of cultic studies. The pattern you've observed, The isolation from prior relationships, the adoption of a new, simplified worldview, the charismatic leader offering a path to perfection or eternal youth, the gradual erosion of free will. These are classic markers of high-demand groups. We've seen it throughout history: Jonestown, Heaven's Gate, the Manson family, even more subtle, insidious forms of corporate manipulation. He picked up one of his notebooks. The radiance, as you put it, is often reported. A beatific, almost serene expression, devoid of normal human anxiety or conflict. It's a consequence of what psychologists call cognitive dissonance reduction. All internal conflict is resolved by fully adopting the leader's reality. The individual gives up their independent self, and in return, they feel a profound sense of peace, a liberation from the mundane attachments of their former life. This is often reinforced by hypnotic suggestion, which can be surprisingly effective, particularly in environments designed to be sensorially overwhelming, like your Obsidian mirror club. Sofia nodded, these explanations resonating with her scientific mind. This made sense. This was logical, but it didn't fully explain the depth of the change in Camilla, the sheer emptiness. However, Helmuth continued, his tone shifting almost imperceptibly, there are certain anomalies in your account that traditional cult analysis struggles to fully explain. The persistent metallic, sickly sweet scent you detected. The extreme physical transformation, beyond what one would expect from mere neglect or emotional withdrawal. The specific target demographic, artists, individuals of a certain sensitivity, a certain vibrancy that seems to be absorbed, transmuted, and the consistent dismissal of official channels, the way all threads seem to vanish into thin air, attributed to the most convenient, least alarming explanation. He leaned forward, his gaze locking onto hers, no longer merely kindly, but intense, penetrating. For centuries, Ms. Vasile, throughout disparate cultures, there have been recurring narratives of a predatory species that preys on humanity. They are often depicted as mythical, supernatural beings. Revenants, strigoi, Nosferatu, what popular culture has conveniently labeled vampires. But what if these weren't simply myths? What if they were, in fact, historical accounts of a biological reality, a highly evolved, highly intelligent species that has learned to adapt and survive into the modern era? Sofia stared at him, her jaw slack. The word hung in the air. Ludicrous, impossible. Vampires? She finally managed, a scoff caught in her throat. Dr. Helmuth, with all due respect, I'm talking about human trafficking, psychological manipulation. I'm a journalist, not a folklorist. He smiled, a gentle, reassuring gesture. Precisely, Ms. Vasile, and I am an anthropologist, a historical consultant. My role is to connect the dots, however disparate they may seem. Consider it this way. What if the myths were simply an attempt by pre-scientific cultures to describe a very real phenomenon they couldn't otherwise comprehend? A nocturnal predator, requiring the vital essence of others, possessing the ability to subtly influence, to charm, to blend seamlessly into human society, growing stronger, perhaps even immortal, by consuming the life force of its victims. He tapped his pen against his notebook. Think of Draculescu's public persona. An art patron, a restorer of ancient castles, a man intimately connected with history, with eternity. He deals in whispering art, art that speaks across centuries. He offers eternal youth. He cultivates a specific aesthetic, the beautiful, the ethereal, the chosen few. These are not random choices, Ms. Vasile. These are carefully curated elements, designed to appeal to, and ensnare, a specific kind of prey. His clubs are feeding grounds, designed to disorient and open the mind to suggestion. His castle, Castelul Umbrelor, a place of initiation, of transformation. Helmuth continued, weaving a chilling tapestry of logic that, despite its extraordinary premise, felt disturbingly coherent. The metallic scent you described, common in historical accounts of blood cults. The gauntness, followed by an unnerving glow, the shedding of the old self, the absorption of a new, synthetic vitality, the profound emotional detachment, the loss of soul for a creature that sustains itself on life, the emotional vibrancy of its victim, might be as crucial as the physical. And the consistent disappearances, written off as drug abuse or runaways, perfectly align with a predatory species that has learned to operate beneath the radar of an increasingly sophisticated, yet paradoxically, increasingly skeptical, society. Sofia listened, her mind reeling. Her scientific skepticism warred fiercely with the compelling rationality of his arguments. It was outlandish, fantastical, yet every point he made seemed to click into place, explaining the discrepancies, the chilling gaps in her own analysis. Draculescu wasn't just a cult leader, he was something more, a sophisticated ancient predator, expertly adapted to the 21st century. The idea was terrifying, but it offered an explanation that no police officer or social worker ever could. "So you're saying," she whispered, her voice barely audible, "that Draculescu is a vampire?" The words still felt absurd, a childish fear. Thomas Helmuth regarded her, his kind eyes softening. "I am saying, Ms. Vasile, that Draculescu exhibits every single characteristic of what ancient cultures described as a vampire, adapted for the modern world. He is a predator who has mastered the art of camouflage, who preys on the lonely, the lost, the seeking, offering them a perversion of immortality while stealing their very essence. The traditional methods of investigation are blind to him because they refuse to acknowledge what he is." He leaned back again, his expression serious. "But you, Miss Vasile, you saw it. You felt it. You refused to be blind." Sofia sat in silence, processing. The air in the study felt heavy, charged with a new, terrifying truth. The world had just expanded, or perhaps simply revealed a hidden, darker dimension she had never conceived. Her anger, previously diffuse, now sharpened into a cold, precise blade, not just rage at the injustice, but a primal, visceral fury at the monstrous deception. Sofia's fury, no longer a frantic roar, had settled into a humming, dangerous quiet, a cold, precise weapon forged by the monstrous deception she now fully understood. The world, once a canvas of verifiable facts, was now a tapestry woven with impossible threads, and she, armed with Helmuth's grim blueprint, had to learn to read them. The Obsidian Mirror. It wasn't just a name, it was a challenge, a dare whispered from the maw of the beast, beckoning them into the heart of its meticulously crafted illusion. Tomorrow they would step into its glittering darkness, not as patrons seeking escape, but as investigators seeking the truth, a truth that left no reflections in polished surfaces, and sucked the very warmth from the air. There, amidst the intoxicating music and the calculated shadows, Sofia would finally confront the spectral reality that had lurked just beyond her sight, a crimson thread weaving through the city's underbelly, waiting for the shadows to lengthen, for the veil to thin, and for a glimpse of the things that were never meant to be seen. Chapter 5. Tracing the Crimson Thread. 2 nights later, the air outside the Obsidian Mirror felt colder than it should have, a subtle, unnatural chill that Sofia now perceived not as weather, but as a presence. Beside her, Dr. Thomas Helmuth adjusted his tweed jacket, his gaze calm yet piercing, as the club's pulsating bass vibrated through the pavement, a siren song for the unwary. This wasn't just another night out, this was their first foray into the heart of the monstrous deception, a chilling journey to begin tracing the crimson thread that Helmuth promised wove through the city's underbelly, waiting to be pulled. Sofia pulled her functional, dark trench coat tighter, the fabric offering little warmth against the pervasive cold. The club's facade, a seamless sheet of obsidian glass, shimmered with reflected neon streetlights, giving it the appearance of a dark, unblinking eye staring back at the city. A small queue of impeccably dressed patrons, a mix of eager new faces and returning devotees, waited to enter, their expressions a blend of anticipation and serene detachment. "Notice the temperature," Thomas murmured, his voice a low hum against the distant bass, his breath barely visible in the still air. "It's consistent, isn't it? An ambient chill that isn't quite London's usual damp bite." Sofia nodded, her senses now acutely tuned. She had noticed it before, a vague discomfort she'd attributed to air conditioning set too high, or simply her own anxiety. Now, with Thomas's words, it felt deliberate, a constant, low-frequency hum of cold that seemed to sink into her bones rather than merely touch her skin. It was an absence of warmth, a subtle draining sensation. They moved with the flow of the queue, Thomas presenting a forged invitation Sofia had managed to procure, granting them access to the exclusive establishment. The bouncer, a mountain of silent muscle, scanned their faces with unnervingly still eyes, before a nearly imperceptible nod granted them passage. The heavy door swung open, revealing the club's interior, a sensory labyrinth of dark, reflective surfaces, low, hypnotic lights, and atmospheric music that was less a beat and more a pervasive, shimmering drone. "Look around," Thomas advised, his hand alight, reassuring presence on her elbow as they stepped inside. "Don't search for the obvious. Feel for the subtle." Sofia took a deep breath, the air inside surprisingly scentless, despite the crush of bodies and expensive perfumes. Her eyes, usually drawn to the vibrant details of a scene, now sought the anomalies. The club was exactly as she remembered, yet terrifyingly different. The patrons still moved, with that unnerving serenity, a trance-like state that had so alarmed her when she'd seen Camilla. Tonight, however, Sofia saw it not as contentment, but as a subtle surrender, a quiet yielding of will. Their eyes, though open, lacked the usual sharp glint of alertness, replaced by a soft, almost unfocused glaze. Her gaze swept across the room, past the artfully arranged seating areas and the glittering bar, settling on the staff. They moved with an elegant, almost preternatural grace. Lyra, Kaylin, and Anya were there, just as in Daniel's account and her own fleeting observation. Lyra, with her cascade of dark hair, was speaking to a group of men, her smile radiant yet fixed. Kaylin, her platinum blonde hair catching the low lights, poured a drink with a precision that seemed robotic. Anya, serene and watchful, glided through the crowd, her eyes scanning, assessing. Sofia's heart began to hammer against her ribs, a frantic drum in the pervasive chill. She looked for their reflections in the numerous polished surfaces. The gleaming black marble floor, the endless mirrored walls, the polished steel of the bar. She found none. Lyra, turning slightly as she laughed at something a patron said, passed directly in front of a floor-to-ceiling mirror. Her form was solid, vibrant, undeniably there. But the mirror, impeccably clean, reflected only the ambient lights, the blurred faces of the patrons behind her, and a segment of the ornate, geometric ceiling. Lyra herself cast no image. The same for Kaylin, her silver tray seemingly floating as she moved past another reflective panel, her face a perfect void in the mirror's depth. Anya, standing by the entrance to a private lounge, stood before a tall, narrow mirror, and Sofia could clearly see the wall behind her, the shifting patterns of light, but no ethereal figure. A cold, primal dread seized Sofia. It wasn't a trick of the light, wasn't a hallucination. Her mind, honed by years of objective reporting, screamed for a rational explanation, but there was none. It was impossible, yet undeniably real. Her breath caught in her throat, a stifled gasp she barely managed to suppress. Thomas's hand squeezed her arm, a silent acknowledgement. He hadn't needed to point it out. The evidence was stark and terrifying. This was it. This was the anomaly, the chilling, irrefutable proof. They spent another hour in the club, moving discreetly, observing. Sofia's journalist's instinct to document, to analyze, warred with a rising tide of fear. Every glance at a staff member, every non-reflection, was a fresh prick of ice. She watched as patrons, their eyes already glazed, approached the staff, drawn by an invisible current. The women, and a few equally enigmatic men, would engage them in brief, intimate conversations, their voices low, their eyes unwavering. Sofia noticed how patrons, after these interactions, often seemed to drift further into that trance-like state, their movements slower, their expressions softer, more pliable. As they prepared to leave, Sofia's attention was drawn to a couple making their way towards the exit. The woman, who had been laughing brightly an hour earlier, now leaned heavily on her partner, her face pale, her movements sluggish. The man, equally subdued, looked as though he'd just run a marathon. Their initial vivacity had been replaced by a profound weariness, an undeniable lethargy. "Observe them as they exit," Thomas murmured, his eyes following the couple. "The energy drain. It's palpable, isn't it?" Sofia watched, a knot forming in her stomach. The couple stumbled out into the cool London night, blinking against the streetlights, looking utterly drained, as if they had left a part of themselves behind within the dark embrace of the obsidian mirror. It was precisely what Thomas had described, a subtle consumption, a slow erosion of life force. The chill that emanated from the club followed them, a tendril of something unseen, leaving them hollow. No. They found a quiet, unassuming cafe a few blocks away, its late-night glow a welcome respite from the club's oppressive darkness. Sofia ordered a strong black coffee, needing something hot and real to steady her nerves. Thomas opted for a herbal tea, his hands wrapped around the mug, his expression thoughtful. "So?" Sofia finally asked, her voice a little hoarse. "No reflections. I saw it. It's real." The words felt foreign on her tongue, too unbelievable to be true, yet she had witnessed it with her own eyes. Thomas nodded slowly. "Indeed. A rather definitive confirmation of the primary hypothesis. Wouldn't you agree?" He took a sip of his tea. "But that's merely the tip of the iceberg of their adaptation. The club itself is a meticulously crafted instrument." He leaned forward, his calm demeanor a stark contrast to the turbulent emotions churning within Sofia. "Consider the environment. The music, first and foremost. It's not just catchy, it operates at a specific frequency, a low, hypnotic thrum that subtly alters brainwave patterns. It bypasses conscious thought, opening the subconscious to suggestion. It's a sonic lullaby, designed to lower inhibitions and create a sense of languid detachment." Sofia thought back to the pervasive drone, the way it seemed to seep into her very bones. She'd felt it even on her first visit, a strange sense of being untethered, floating. "Then the lighting," Thomas continued, gesturing with a hand. "Low, ambient, creating long shadows and obscuring precise details. It distorts perception, making the familiar seem ethereal, blurring the line between reality and illusion. The reflective surfaces, ironically, enhance this. They don't just create a sense of opulence. They disorient. Patrons see fragmented versions of themselves, of others, fostering a sense of unreality, a detachment from their solid form." "And the exclusivity?" Sofia prompted, remembering the velvet ropes, the bouncers, the carefully curated guest list. "Precisely. It plays on human psychology, the desire to belong, to be part of something elite. It creates an almost cult-like allure, even before you step inside. Once in, that feeling of privilege, combined with the subtle sensory manipulation, makes patrons more receptive. They want asterisks to believe in the magic of the place, in the promise of something extraordinary." He paused, letting his words sink in. "And the staff, Lyra, Kaelin, Anya, and their ilk, they are the conduits. Their seductive charm isn't just about physical beauty, It's about a profound, ancient charisma. They engage patrons in conversations about art, about philosophy, about new truths. Exactly what Camilla spoke of. They offer validation, a sense of being understood on a deeper level. This intellectual and emotional intimacy, coupled with the club's disorienting atmosphere, creates the perfect vulnerability for what I termed the whispering art. So, the whispering art isn't just a painting, Sofia clarified, recalling Daniel's fascination and Camilla's indoctrination. It's the whole process. The club, the conversations, the draining of will? Exactly, Thomas confirmed. It's a metaphor, but a very literal one in its effect. They don't just take blood. They take agency, vibrancy, the very essence of a person's will and spark. They prepare the ground, soften the subject, make them receptive to Draculescu's ultimate influence. The painting Daniel found at the castle is just one, highly potent, artifact of this process, designed to accelerate the psychological surrender. But here, at the Obsidian Mirror, it's a more diffuse, continuous siphoning, a conditioning. By the time they invite someone like Camilla to Castelul Umbrelor for further studies, their will is already significantly eroded. They are already chosen. Sofia shivered despite the hot coffee. The chilling logic of it, the sheer audacity of hiding such a monstrous, ancient predation in plain sight, using the very trappings of modernity, exclusivity, art, intellectualism, as its disguise, was terrifying. Her skepticism was no longer a shield, it was a memory. The world had shifted on its axis, and she was now firmly rooted in its dark, impossible underbelly. The next few evenings were spent in a similar fashion, though not within the hypnotic walls of the Obsidian Mirror. Sofia, leveraging her extensive journalistic network and formidable investigative skills, began the laborious process of tracking down former employees of Draculescu's establishment. She knew better than to approach anyone still working there. The devotion Thomas described would make them impenetrable. But former staff, those who had perhaps seen too much or felt too much discomfort, might prove to be invaluable. Her first lead came from a contact at a rival event management company, who vaguely remembered a young woman, a former PR assistant, who had left the Obsidian Mirror abruptly a year ago, citing burnout and unusual management demands. Sofia found the woman, Chloe, working at a small, independent art gallery, still looking slightly haunted. They met in a quiet park in Bloomsbury, the autumn leaves a riot of color around them, a stark contrast to the darkness they were discussing. Chloe was hesitant at first, her eyes darting nervously. "It was just weird, you know," Chloe fiddled with a stray leaf. "Lord Draculescu was charming, absolutely, generous, but also demanding. Not just about work hours, which were insane, but about an atmosphere. He was obsessed with the new aura of the place, the new energy." "Can you give me an example?" Sofia asked gently, her recorder tucked discreetly in her bag, though she made no move to switch it on. She preferred to gain trust first, Chloe sighed. "Well, the core staff, the ones who had been there forever. Lyra, Kaylin, Anya, they were different. They never seemed to eat. Or drink. Not even water. I worked 16-hour shifts with them, saw them at staff parties, and I never, Nigel Drinkalin to ever, saw them put food or drink to their lips. I mentioned it once to my manager, a woman called Isabella, and she just gave me this cold, blank stare, and told me to focus on my job and not gossip about my superiors. It was like a chill went right through me." Sofia felt that same chill now, despite the mild afternoon sun. "Anything else?" "The hours," Chloe continued, her voice dropping, "unusually long, and the dedication, it was almost religious. The way Isabella, for example, talked about Lord Draculescu. Like he was a god. She'd say things like, 'He's offering us eternity,' or 'We are chosen to serve the true vision.' Sounded like a cult, honestly." I tried to talk to some of the others, but they just looked at me with those blank, serene eyes, like Camilla's, and brushed me off. It spooked me enough to leave. I needed a normal job, with normal people who ate lunch. The metallic scent Sofia had noticed in Camilla's apartment flashed into her mind. The constant chill. The absence of reflections. And now, the lack of eating and drinking. Each piece, individually dismissible as an eccentricity, was now part of an undeniable pattern. Another lead led them to a former cleaner, a gruff, elderly man named Marek, who Sofia found in an anonymous East End pub. He was wary, his eyes hardened by years of scraping by, but a £20 note, and Sofia's genuine concern loosened his tongue. "The girls," Marek grunted, nursing a pint. "Pretty, yes, but cold. Always cold. Even in summer. And the mess? Not much of a mess, actually. No food wrappers. No empty bottles from them. Just the customers. And sometimes I'd see them, late at night, in the deserted club, just standing there, perfectly still, like statues, not resting, just waiting." He shivered, despite the warmth of the pub. "Gave me the creeps, that did. So quiet, always watching. Never blinked, seemed like. Never blinked." Sofia stored the detail, a fresh shard of ice. Thomas, listening intently to each interview, offered insights, piecing together the fragmented accounts. The core staff, his assistants, are clearly the key. Their unwavering loyalty, their physical peculiarities, all consistent with a non-human, or at least a highly conditioned existence. The eternity he offers, it's a promise, but also a cage. As the days turned into a week, Sofia and Thomas built their case, not with hard evidence that would stand in a court of law, but with a mosaic of chilling anecdotes, undeniable observations, and the growing, terrifying conviction that they were hunting something ancient and utterly inhuman. Sofia's journalist's mind, once grounded in empirical truth, now operated in a world where the impossible was not only possible, but actively preying upon the unsuspecting. The hunt had truly begun, Thomas had said, and Sofia knew it was true. They had traced the crimson thread through the opulent, shadowed halls of the Obsidian mirror, unraveling fragments of Draculescu's carefully constructed artifice. They'd seen the fear in the eyes of former employees, sensed the emptiness behind the patrons' smiles, and understood that the club was merely the public facade of something vast, ancient, and deeply predatory. Yet despite their grim determination, a part of them had still clung to a fragile hope that their worst fears were merely conjecture. That hope shattered with the first blinking news alert on Sofia's phone, echoed moments later by a frantic call from Thomas. Daniel Hughes, the very art dealer whose path had led them to Draculescu, was officially missing. Sotheby's, attempting to contain the damage, issued a statement full of carefully chosen words that only served to amplify their chilling certainty. The theoretical wisp of danger had coalesced into a tangible horror. Now, the thread they traced was stained with blood, leading not just to an empire of shadows, but to a very real, very personal victim, and the terrifying realization that Camilla was next. Their next move would not be a mere investigation. It would be a desperate race against an enemy whose true face remained hidden, but whose deadly intentions were now tragically clear. Chapter 6. The Vanishing Dealer. The screen of Sofia's phone still pulsed with the alert, "Daniel Hughes, officially missing." Across the city, Thomas's voice, sharp with an unspoken dread, cut through the quiet of her London apartment, confirming her own chilling certainty. "Sotheby's statement is a smokescreen," he stated, the words hanging heavy with the knowledge that this wasn't just a disappearance, it was Draculescu's bloody signature. The race, Sofia knew, had just become a desperate sprint to save Camilla. Sofia's fingers trembled as she refreshed the news page on her laptop, the headline screaming in bold black letters, "Sotheby's art expert Daniel Hughes missing after Carpathian appraisal." Below it, A carefully curated photo of Daniel smiling politely in a well-tailored suit seemed to mock her. The accompanying article, attributed to a Sotheby's press release, spun a tale of Daniel's eccentric nature and unpredictable travel habits, hinting at a sudden, spontaneous extended stay abroad. They even managed to weave in a quote about his passion for undiscovered art, leading him to remote locales, implying a romantic, if somewhat irresponsible, pursuit. It was a masterpiece of corporate deflection, designed to soothe shareholders and deflect any uncomfortable questions about a missing employee on a high-profile assignment. "They're painting him as a flaky genius," Sofia muttered into the phone, her voice tight with suppressed fury. "As if he just decided to disappear into the wilderness with a paintbrush and a sketchbook." "Precisely," Thomas responded, his voice a low rumble. Sofia pictured him in his study, surrounded by stacks of ancient texts and modern crime reports, a man bridging centuries of knowledge. A convenient narrative. No mess, no fuss, no difficult questions for Lord Draculescu, whose name, I note, is conspicuously absent from the official statement, though he hosted Mr. Hughes. Sofia slammed her palms softly against her desk, the sound swallowed by the thick silence of her apartment. "It's been almost a week since we confirmed Lyra, Kaelin, and Anya cast no reflection, and now Daniel is missing. It's too neat, too perfectly timed." "Indeed," Thomas affirmed. "The pattern is clear, Sofia. Daniel Hughes was a guest at Castelul Umbrelor. He was isolated, enchanted, and then vanished. Just as Camilla is being prepared for the same fate, lured by promises of eternal youth and further studies, his disappearance isn't an isolated incident, it's a bell tolling for others." A cold dread seeped into Sofia's bones, chilling her far more than the late London autumn. Daniel was an art expert, a man of precise logic and refined taste. If the asterisk could be taken, so subtly and completely, then Camilla, with her impressionable nature and yearning for deeper meaning, was already halfway gone. The image of Camilla's empty, unnervingly serene eyes flashed in Sofia's mind, spurring a fresh surge of resolve. This wasn't just a story anymore. It was personal, desperately urgent. "We have to move faster, Thomas," Sofia said, her voice dropping to a fierce whisper. "We have to understand how he does it, beyond the hypnotic music and the whispering art. We need to know his endgame, his full scope. If we can understand his true ideology, maybe we can find a way to break its hold." Thomas was silent for a moment, and Sofia heard the rustle of papers on his end. "My thoughts precisely. I've already begun compiling every public statement, every interview, every article attributed to Lord Draculescu. His public persona is meticulously crafted, Sofia, but even the most polished lies leave threads of truth. If he is indeed the ancient predator we suspect, his worldview, his philosophy, will be subtly woven into everything he says, a dark gospel veiled in light. "I'll be there in an hour," Sofia said, already grabbing her coat. The analytical pursuit, she realized, was her only weapon against this ancient, insidious evil. Somner's asterisk. Thomas Helmuth's study was a sanctuary of organized chaos, the air thick with the scent of old paper and lukewarm tea. Sofia arrived to find him perched on a rolling ladder, meticulously cataloguing a newly acquired volume. Dust motes danced in the single shaft of sunlight that pierced the grimy window, illuminating the towering bookshelves that lined every wall, laden with books spanning centuries, languages, and disciplines. The small, worn armchair Sofia settled into was quickly surrounded by precariously stacked journals and printouts, forming an impromptu barricade against the world outside. "I've started," Thomas said, gesturing to a large monitor displaying Draculescu's corporate website. The elegant, minimalist design featured striking black and white photos of Castelul Umbrelor, art galleries, and sleek nightclub interiors. The About Us section boasted flowing prose about Draculescu's visionary patronage, his commitment to preserving heritage while embracing modernity, It's all so beautiful, Sofia admitted, scrolling through a page titled The Draculescu Philosophy, and vague, like an expensive perfume ad. Thomas chuckled, a dry academic sound. That's the brilliance of it. Vagueness allows for multiple interpretations. For the mundane, it's about luxury, art, and timeless living. For the discerning few, for the Camillas and Daniels of the world, it offers something far more seductive. He pointed to a paragraph on the screen. Read this aloud, Sofia, if you would, the section on cultivating beauty. Sofia leaned closer, her brow furrowed. We believe true beauty is not merely skin deep, nor is it fleeting. It is a profound, internal state, cultivated through disciplined understanding and a rejection of the superficial. Lord Draculescu's initiatives aim to nurture this essence, allowing individuals to transcend the mundane and achieve their fullest, most radiant selves. And what does that suggest to you, taken at face value? Thomas prompted. Self-improvement, Sofia replied instantly. Wellness, maybe even spiritual enlightenment. It's exactly the kind of language that drew Camilla in. Precisely, Thomas said, his gaze fixed on the screen. Now consider it through the lens of a predatory species that sustains itself on life force. Cultivating beauty isn't about personal growth. It's about identifying and refining the most desirable hosts, the most vibrant energies. Rejecting the superficial can be read as shedding one's humanity, one's attachments to the mortal coil. And, transcending the mundane, well, for Draculescu that means immortality, a release from the burdens of mortality he so often references. Sofia felt a chill crawl up her spine. The words on the screen, once benign and aspirational, now pulsed with a sinister undercurrent. They weren't just double meanings, they were a complete inversion of human values, twisted to serve a dark, ancient purpose. They spent hours immersed in Draculescu's labyrinthine public persona. They devoured transcripts of interviews where he spoke with eloquent ease about the enduring power of art and the ephemeral nature of human existence. Thomas meticulously highlighted phrases, his pen scratching notations on printouts that quickly littered his desk. Here, Thomas said, tapping a finger on an article from a high society magazine. Lord Draculescu, a tireless advocate for the arts, spoke eloquently on the desire for eternity that drives all true creative endeavors. He mused that the greatest works of art are not merely preserved, but nourished by the admiration of generations, taking on a life of their own, becoming timeless. He offered a similar vision for the human spirit, a way to defy the ravages of time and touch the infinite. Nourished, Sofia repeated, the word tasting like ash in her mouth. Like sustenance. Exactly, Thomas confirmed, his eyes glinting behind his spectacles. He is speaking of the transfer of energy, Sofia. Of drawing power from those who admire his art, whether it's a painting or a carefully curated lifestyle. His clubs, his castle, even his public image, they are all designed to identify and attract those with a certain vibrant energy, an artistic sensitivity, a yearning for something more. Those are the ones who are most susceptible, the ones whose life force can be most easily cultivated and nourished. He pulled up another article, this one, a philosophical piece Draculescu had contributed to an online journal. It spoke of humanity's inherent weakness for sentimentality and the liberation that comes from shedding the shackles of mundane attachments, love, fear, regret, to embrace a higher, purer state of being. This is it, Thomas murmured, his voice grim. This is the core of his dark gospel. Emotional detachment, a severance from human connection. Camilla, speaking of being free from mundane attachments, it's a direct echo. He's not just taking their physical presence, he's taking their very humanity, replacing it with a hollow, serene emptiness that he then claims is eternity. Sofia felt a wave of nausea. The elegance of Draculescu's deception was terrifying. He didn't promise power or riches, but fees meaning asterisk, transcendence asterisk, my eternity. He offered an escape from the very things that made them human, rebranding their slow demise as an evolution. It was a sophisticated, insidious cult, masquerading as high culture. The chilling realization settled deep within her. Draculescu wasn't just a monster. He was a master manipulator of the human spirit, playing on its deepest desires and vulnerabilities. Oh, asterisk. The sun had long since set, plunging Thomas's study into a soft lamplit glow. Maps were spread across the large oak table, intermingling with printouts of missing persons reports and news clippings. Sofia had traded her initial revulsion for a cold, focused anger. Okay, so we have Daniel, confirmed missing from Castellul Umbrelor, Sofia stated, circling a small red dot on a map of Romania, and Camilla, currently in London, but invited for further studies at the castle. She connected London to Romania with a thin red line, a stark visual representation of the danger. Thomas pushed his spectacles up his nose, his eyes scanning the array of documents. Now let's cross-reference this with our earlier findings, the spikes in disappearances we noted in various Eastern European cities where Draculescu operates. And let's not forget the former employees, accounts from the Obsidian mirror clubs, particularly Chloe mentioning eternity, and Marek's observations about the staff. They began their methodical work, a grim archaeological dig through contemporary disappearance reports. Sofia, with her journalist's nose for patterns, sifted through official police reports, archived social media posts, and desperate pleas from families. Thomas, with his anthropological insights, identified the common threads. Here, Sofia exclaimed, pointing to a cluster of reports from Prague. 3 young artists, all within a year, vanished without a trace. All frequented the Obsidian mirror there. One was a painter, known for his intensely soulful portraits, the kind of beauty Draculescu cultivates, no doubt. Thomas nodded, circling the location on the map. And here, a renowned sculptor from Budapest, whose last known public appearance was at a Draculescu-sponsored art exhibition. A patron of the arts, just like Daniel. Reports say he was unusually withdrawn in the weeks prior to his disappearance, much like Camilla. The pattern began to emerge with terrifying clarity. It wasn't random. It wasn't just Daniel or Camilla. Marquette Onung Bucharest, 2 years ago. A rising fashion model, praised for her ethereal presence, last seen leaving the Obsidian mirror. Night Eyes Warsaw, last year, A prominent opera singer, celebrated for her, quote, captivating stage presence and emotional depth, disappeared after attending a private gala hosted by Draculescu. Neiters Belgrade, 8 months ago, A brilliant young architect, involved in a high-profile restoration project, vanished shortly after an interview with Draculescu about potential collaboration on Castellul Umbrelor. The victims weren't just young. They were vibrant, talented, charismatic, people who exuded a certain kind of radiant life force. Artists, performers, socialites, individuals whose energy, Thomas had theorized, would be particularly potent. Their disappearances often coincided with Draculescu's public, art restoration, projects, or the opening of a new Obsidian mirror club, providing convenient cover or a plausible reason for their connection to him. Sofia laid her palm over the sprawling map, now a web of red circles and connecting lines. The scale of it was breathtaking, horrifying. Draculescu wasn't just preying on a handful of individuals. He had built a global network of extraction, a sophisticated, ancient predator, harvesting human vitality on an industrial scale, hidden in plain sight behind a facade of culture and philanthropy. This isn't just a few victims, Thomas, Sofia whispered, her voice hoarse with a new depth of understanding and dread. This is an empire. He's been doing this for years, maybe centuries. How many more? Thomas looked at the map, his expression grim. The Commune of Eternity isn't just a catchy phrase for Camilla Sofia, it's a literal collective. These individuals, if not consumed entirely, are likely brought to a central location, a place where their eternal youth is cultivated and maintained for his purposes. They become part of his flock, his eternally young, eternally subservient subjects. The thought of Camilla, her vibrancy slowly siphoned away, her humanity replaced by a vacant serenity, twisted Sofia's gut. Daniel Hughes was a stark, chilling confirmation of the danger. Camilla was next. The ticking clock, once a metaphorical threat, now felt like a physical pulse thrumming in her ears. "He's inviting Camilla to Castelul Umbrelor," Sofia stated, her voice devoid of inflection, her eyes fixed on the red dot marking the castle in the Carpathian Vale. "For further studies. That's where he takes them. That's where he turns them, or whatever it is he does." The declaration hung heavy, not just a destination, but a promise of confrontation. The ancient evil wouldn't merely wait for them. Every step, every mile between London and the shadowed spires of Castelul Umbrelor would be a gauntlet. Thomas, ever practical, already envisioned the meticulous planning. The discreet routes, the false trails, the myriad precautions against an adversary whose tendrils stretched far beyond the Vale itself. This wasn't a holiday, it was an infiltration into the heart of a living weapon, and they would need to move like ghosts or die like fools. But even the most meticulous plans could only shield them so much. As the moon climbed higher over London, casting long shadows across Thomas's study, a deeper chill settled in Sofia's bones. She knew, with chilling certainty, that their departure would not go unnoticed. The journey itself, through a land steeped in legend and fear, would be a test of their very existence, a perilous gauntlet where every stranger could be a spy, every shadow a trap. Their target, Daniel Hughes, and their friend Camilla, might already be lost, but the road ahead offered no turning back, only a descent into a darkness that had been waiting for them, and was now actively stirring. Chapter 7. Journey into the Vale. The chilling certainty that their departure would not go unnoticed, that every step towards the shadowed spires of Castelul Umbrelor was a perilous gauntlet, solidified into Sofia's grim resolve. Beside her, Thomas Helmuth, ever the pragmatist, already had maps spread across his study table, his low murmur outlining discreet routes and necessary precautions against an adversary whose tendrils stretched far beyond any mere border. They would need to move like ghosts, their every meticulously planned action an echo of the insidious game Draculescu himself played, as they prepared to descend into the darkness. Thomas's study was a comforting mess of erudition, but tonight, the stacks of books and ancient artifacts seemed to hum with a new, urgent energy. He traced a finger along a jagged line on a topographical map of the Carpathians, his spectacles glinting in the desk lamp's warm glow. "Direct flights are out of the question, Sofia," he stated, his voice calm but firm. "Too easily traceable. Draculescu's reach is comprehensive, not just within the supernatural, but the mundane. He has cultivated a network, a human infrastructure, to support his activities." Sofia nodded, her dark eyes fixed on the map, then on Thomas. She'd spent the last few hours poring over news reports and geographical data, trying to find a chink in Draculescu's seemingly impenetrable armor. So, trains, then buses? Local transit to blend in. Precisely. A meandering path. London to Budapest by rail, then a series of smaller connections towards the Romanian border, perhaps a rented car for the final leg through the mountains. Different names, different times, different modes of transport. We become anomalies in his system, not direct targets. Thomas looked up, his expression serious. "This isn't a quick trip, Sofia. It will take several days, and every mile will carry its own risks." Fear, cold and sharp, flickered through Sofia. She pushed it down. Camilla's pale, vacant face, Daniel's official disappearance. These fueled a fire that burned hotter than any terror. And when we get there, Castelul Umbrelor isn't exactly a public park. Covert observation, Thomas replied, leaning back, the springs of his chair creaking softly. We identify patterns, look for weaknesses. Draculescu operates with a theatrical flourish. But even the most elaborate stage has backstage areas. We need to find those. He paused, picking up a heavy, leather-bound volume from a stack. This isn't about brute force, Sofia. It's about knowledge. His kind thrives on secrecy and the incredulity of the mundane world. We have to expose him. Sofia walked over to her backpack, which lay open on the floor. Her usual investigative kit, a laptop, discreet camera, voice recorder, felt woefully inadequate now. She reached for a small, sturdy utility knife, its blade sharp and unforgiving, then a canister of pepper spray she'd kept hidden for years. They felt heavier, more meaningful now. I'm not naive, Thomas. I know what we're up against. But I also know what I'm fighting for. She carefully tucked the knife into a hidden pocket in her backpack, and the pepper spray into her jacket. Thomas watched her, a faint, approving nod. Good. We need every advantage. Draculescu preys on the unsuspecting, on those who refuse to see beyond the surface. We, however, are looking for the monster beneath the polish. Over the next 2 days, their meticulous planning unfolded. Thomas secured their travel documents under assumed names, booking convoluted routes that crisscrossed Europe's rail networks. Sofia, meanwhile, focused on physical preparation. She bought comfortable, nondescript clothing, packed high-energy snacks, and ensured her phone was loaded with offline maps and encrypted communication apps. There was an unspoken understanding between them, a shared gravity that transcended their brief acquaintance. He, the academic turned reluctant warrior, she, the journalist, thrust into a nightmare. Their disparate skills, once a professional advantage, were now their only hope of survival. As the sun set on their final evening in London, casting long shadows across Thomas's study, Sofia felt a profound shift within herself. The fear was still there, a low thrumming beneath her skin, but it was now tempered by a cold, sharp resolve. She was no longer just investigating, she was hunting. And she was ready. Their journey began, a labyrinthine path across a continent. The initial leg, a high-speed train from London, was uneventful, a brief respite before they plunged deeper into Draculescu's domain. But as they exchanged trains for regional buses, then buses for shared taxis, the subtle shifts began to make themselves known. The air grew heavier with each mile they traveled east, not just with the scent of pine and damp earth, but with a palpable sense of unease. Sofia found herself scanning faces, listening to snatches of conversation, her journalistic instincts honed to a razor's edge. Thomas, ever watchful, pointed out the almost imperceptible signs. Their first stopover was a small, dusty town, nestled in a valley just beyond the Hungarian border. They checked into a family-run guest house, an unassuming building with peeling paint and floral curtains. The elderly woman behind the counter, her face a web of wrinkles, gave them a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Ah, tourists," she'd chirped, her English surprisingly good. "Going deep into the mountains, are we? Not many venture so far this time of year." Her gaze lingered on their backpacks, too neat, too practical for casual sightseeing. When Thomas asked for directions to a specific, remote village near the Carpathian foothills, a calculated diversion from their true destination, her smile tightened. "Such a long way," she'd murmured, then offered a route that Thomas later cross-referenced on his own maps to be significantly longer, winding and poorly maintained. A subtle misdirection, easily dismissed as local inefficiency, but it sent a prickle of unease up Sofia's spine. At a gas station deeper into the Romanian countryside, The attendant, a hulking man with a pitted face, filled their rental car's tank with an unnerving efficiency. He spoke no English, but as Sofia handed him the lei, his eyes, dark and knowing, met hers. He glanced towards the GPS screen, which displayed their chosen detour destination, and a flicker of something, recognition, warning, crossed his face. "You go to the old places," he grunted in broken Romanian. A statement rather than a question, his voice a gravelly whisper. It was a fleeting interaction, one Sofia might have forgotten had Thomas not later observed. He knew. Not our exact destination perhaps, but our general intent. They're watching, Sofia, always watching. Border crossings, usually a bureaucratic bore, took on a new, unsettling dimension. At a particularly remote crossing into a lesser-known region of the Carpathian Vale, the young, uniformed officer had been too polite, too interested. He'd flipped through their passports, lingered on their assumed names, and asked a series of questions that felt oddly pointed. "Business or pleasure?" he'd asked, his smile thin. "And where exactly will you be residing during your stay? The usual resorts are quite a distance from here." His gaze, sharp and assessing, seemed to strip away their carefully constructed facade. Sofia had felt a cold sweat on her back, certain he saw through them. Thomas, however, had handled it with practiced ease, his professorial air diffusing suspicion, weaving a believable tale of anthropological research into forgotten local folklore. They were waved through, but the incident left a lingering chill. "Fear, Sofia," Thomas had explained later that evening, as they ate a sparse meal in a dimly lit empty tavern. "It's a powerful tool. Draculescu doesn't need to directly threaten these people. His reputation, his influence, his sheer presence is enough. They know who he is, what he represents. They perform these small services out of a desire to remain unnoticed, unmolested. It's a silent complicity born of terror." Sofia understood. She saw it in the averted gazes of the shopkeepers when she asked for local maps, in the hushed tones of villagers when the name Draculescu was accidentally uttered by a tourist, in the almost imperceptible hesitation before giving directions that were just a little bit wrong. Draculescu's tendrils extended not just into the opulent clubs and ancient castles, but into the very fabric of these forgotten communities, binding them in a web of silent dread. The Carpathian Vale, once merely a name on a map, was becoming a tangible, breathing entity, its very air thick with suspicion and hidden dangers. The anonymity they had sought was a fragile illusion. They were being observed, their journey not a secret, but a stage for an unseen audience. Every mile brought them closer to their goal, but also deeper into the predator's lair, where every helpful hand might be an extension of its will. The days blurred into a landscape of ancient forests, mist-shrouded peaks and winding rivers. Their rental car, a battered but reliable Dacia, became their mobile sanctuary, a bubble of relative safety in a world that felt increasingly hostile. Sofia, who had started the journey with a profound distrust of Thomas's fantastical theories, now found herself relying on his astute observations, his almost supernatural ability to discern the subtle currents of fear and manipulation that permeated their surroundings. Their partnership, forged in the fires of shared purpose, solidified with each passing, suspicious encounter. They spoke less, their communication shifting to a series of shared glances, knowing nods and quick, quiet agreements. The silence of the mountain roads was punctuated by the rhythmic hum of the engine and the beating of their own increasingly wary hearts. It was the fifth night of their journey. A suffocating blanket of darkness had fallen over the Carpathian Mountains. The Dacia's headlights cut weak paths through a swirling mist that clung to the winding road, revealing fleeting glimpses of gnarled ancient trees and jagged rock faces. The air, already crisp with autumn's chill, felt heavy, almost oppressive. They were deep in the wilderness now, hours from the nearest village, the only sounds, the whirring of the engine, and the occasional rustle of unseen nocturnal creatures. Sofia gripped the steering wheel, her knuckles white. Fatigue was a heavy cloak, but the heightened sense of alert, a constant companion since leaving London, kept her senses sharp. Thomas sat beside her, seemingly lost in thought, his gaze fixed on the ever-present shadows beyond the reach of their lights. Suddenly, without warning, a sickening thump asterisk reverberated through the car's chassis. It felt less like hitting something, and more like something giving way. A split second later, the steering wheel went unnervingly slack in Sofia's hands, responding to her desperate corrections with a terrifying delayed looseness. The Dacia, instead of hugging the mountain road's curves, began to drift dangerously wide, its tires losing purchase on the damp asphalt. "What was that?" Sofia gasped, fighting the wheel. Her heart hammered against her ribs. "Steering, it's gone!" Thomas's voice was sharp, cutting through the rising panic. "The rack or the brakes?" He was right. As Sofia slammed her foot on the brake pedal, it went all the way to the floor with no resistance. The car was hurtling towards a sharp, unlit bend, beyond which she knew, from their map study, lay a sheer drop into a ravine. The abyss yawned, black and hungry, just ahead. "No brakes, no steering," Sofia cried out, adrenaline surging through her veins, overriding the exhaustion, sharpening her focus to a pinpoint. The Dacia bucked and swayed, a metal beast fighting its rider. The faint guardrail at the edge of the precipice loomed closer, growing terrifyingly fast in the headlights. "Emergency brake!" Thomas yelled, his voice surprisingly calm amidst the chaos, cutting through the roaring wind and the screech of protesting tires. "Handbrake now! Hand downshift! Force it!" Sofia's instincts took over. With one hand she ripped the handbrake lever up, feeling the rear wheels lock and skid, sending the car into a violent fishtail. With the other, she wrestled the gear stick, forcing it down into a lower gear with a metallic grind that echoed her own scream of frustration. The Dacia shuddered, protesting every inch, its speed bleeding away in agonizing increments, the smell of burning rubber filling the air. For what felt like an eternity, the car slid, headlights sweeping wildly across the terrifying drop, then back to the blurring trees. The guardrail was inches away. Sofia braced for impact, her body tensed, her eyes wide with a primal fear. Then, with a final shuddering lurch, the Dacia spun sideways, its front wheels digging into the loose gravel shoulder, coming to an abrupt, jarring halt. The nose of the car hung precariously over the edge of the precipice, the headlights illuminating a dizzying void below. Silence descended, thick and suffocating, broken only by the ticking of the cooling engine and their ragged breaths. Sofia's hands were still clenched on the wheel, trembling violently. Her entire body ached, a testament to the sheer physical exertion of fighting the out-of-control vehicle. "Are you all right?" Thomas asked, his voice low, his hand on her shoulder, a grounding presence. Sofia could only nod, mute with shock. Her heart felt like a trapped bird, beating a frantic rhythm against her ribs. She was alive. They were alive. Slowly she released the wheel, her fingers numb. Thomas opened his door, retrieved a powerful flashlight from his bag, and stepped out into the swirling mist. Sofia, still shaky, joined him, her legs feeling like jelly. The scene was chillingly clear. The Dacia's front passenger tire was deflated, not from a puncture, but from a precise, deep slash in the sidewall. And then Thomas shone his light underneath the vehicle. "Here," he said, his voice grim. "Brake lines, cut clean through." He pointed to a thin, glistening line of fluid on the asphalt. And the steering column, the linkage, loosened almost to the point of complete detachment. Sofia stared, horror constricting her throat. It wasn't an accident. It couldn't have been. The precise, calculated nature of the damage, the multiple points of failure, this was deliberate. "Someone knew we were coming," she whispered, the words catching in her throat. Her earlier dread, the subtle paranoia of the past few days, solidified into a terrifying certainty. Draculescu didn't just have a network, he had eyes and hands everywhere. He was actively trying to stop them. To kill them. The chilling certainty had set in. They were registered. No longer cloaked by the Vale's obscurity, Sofia and Thomas were now prey, hunted by an ancient entity whose insidious reach had just tightened its grip. The wrecked car, the scent of fear still clinging to their clothes, served as a stark reminder that their cautious expedition had morphed into a desperate race. Ahead, the distant, shadowed spires of Castelul Umbrelor, once a theoretical objective, now pulsed with a tangible, malevolent presence. It felt like a looming, inescapable trap, yet in the heart of that very danger lay their only, desperate hope. Survival meant outsmarting the predator, finding a weakness where none seemed to exist. As they pressed onward through the encroaching dusk, leaving behind the wreckage of their journey, their destination beckoned. They would approach the Fortress of Shadows not as invaders, but as silent observers, searching for the forgotten seams in its ancient stone, a hidden passage through its unyielding defenses. But with the fading light would come revelations far more chilling than any legend, as the true nature of their enemy, and the impossible horror they faced, began to materialize from the encroaching darkness. Chapter 8. Sentinel of Shadows. The cold bite of the mountain air was a dull ache compared to the certainty that they were being hunted. Leaving the mangled Dacia a ruin in their wake, Sofia and Thomas had pushed through the deepening twilight, each step a silent testament to their grim resolve. Now, nestled within a tangled knot of ancient pines high above the valley floor, the true horror of their destination unfurled before them. Castelul Umbrelor, the Castle of Shadows, rose from the encroaching darkness, a jagged silhouette against the bruised purple sky, its spires like predatory claws reaching for the heavens. This was not a fortress to be stormed, but a lair to be meticulously observed, its every shadow and glimmer holding a potential trap. They were no longer investigators, they were silent sentinels, hoping to find a forgotten seam in the very fabric of their enemy's domain. The immediate aftermath of the car's sabotage had been a blur of adrenaline and desperate action. They'd walked and walked and walked, guided by Thomas's unerring sense of direction and Sofia's burning need to put distance between themselves and the wreckage. The threat wasn't a lone wolf or a band of thieves. It was an invisible, all-seeing intelligence. The air still vibrated with the silent understanding that their presence was known, their intent clear. They were prey, forced to use the predator's own tactics of stealth and patience. By late afternoon, the first glimpse of Castelul Umbrelor, even from a distant ridge, had solidified their resolve. It wasn't the romantic Gothic edifice of travel brochures, but a looming, almost organic extension of the jagged peaks themselves, its ancient stones fused with startlingly modern, darkened glass, reflecting the dying sun in glints of malevolent crimson. They moved with the silent efficiency of seasoned trackers, Sofia's lean frame weaving through the undergrowth, Thomas's tweed jacket surprisingly camouflaged against the bark of ancient trees. They found their spot, a natural hollow protected by a thicket of gnarled oaks, their branches heavy with lichen. From here, the castle was a silent, sprawling beast, its distant roar only imagined. Sofia pulled out the compact, high-powered binoculars from her rucksack, her movements economical, devoid of wasted energy. Thomas, meanwhile, began laying out a small, unobtrusive tarp, creating a basic, camouflaged shelter against the biting wind. "Optimal visibility, minimal exposure," Thomas murmured, adjusting a branch to better conceal their position. "He won't expect us this close, not after the road incident. He'll assume we'd retreat, or worse, be dead." Sofia grunted, pressing the binoculars to her eyes. The castle shimmered into focus, sharp and unnervingly still. She scanned the walls, the turrets, the expansive grounds. Nothing moved, No guards patrolled the parapets, no lights flickered in random windows, no vehicles entered or exited the grand, iron gates. It was a monument to silence, to an eerie, unnatural peace. "It's quiet," she breathed, the word thin on the wind. "Too quiet. Where are the security cameras, the patrols? Even with its remote location, this place houses invaluable art." And Draculescu himself. Thomas settled beside her, offering a thermos of surprisingly strong hot tea. "That's his confidence, Sofia, his arrogance. Why bother with human security when you possess something far more formidable? He doesn't fear conventional threats. And remoteness for him isn't a vulnerability, it's a shield. Who would stumble upon this place by accident? And for those who seek it, like Daniel Hughes, like us, they're already ensnared in a web far more intricate than barbed wire and infrared sensors." He took a slow sip of his tea. His security is psychological, the lure of the unattainable, the promise of something extraordinary. And for those who resist or those like us who pry, well, he has other methods. He already tried one, didn't he? Sofia shivered, a visceral memory of the dacia hurtling towards the ravine. She lowered the binoculars, her gaze sweeping over the vast ancient forest. It felt alive, watching them. "So we observe. For what?" "Patterns," Thomas replied, his voice calm, methodical. "Vampires, despite their ancient origins, adapt. But some habits are deeply ingrained. Dusk is their rising, dawn their retreat. We look for movements that defy the natural rhythm of the human world. A car leaving at midnight and returning just before sunrise, the subtle opening of an obscure gate. The shifts in energy, however minute. They spent the next few hours in a tense, watchful silence. The wind sighed through the pines, a mournful lament. The castle remained impassive, a dark jewel set in the deepening twilight. Sofia forced herself to focus, to let her journalistic eye categorize, analyze, absorb. Every window, every shadow, every faint glimmer of light within the castle walls. It was a painstaking, frustrating process. The very lack of visible activity was itself a pattern, a testament to Draculescu's absolute control and utter lack of fear. He expected no intruders, saw no threats from the outside world. He was the threat. The air grew colder as the sun dipped below the jagged peaks, painting the sky in hues of deep violet and blood orange. It was then, as the last vestiges of daylight surrendered to the encroaching darkness, that Thomas stirred. "Time for part 2 of our plan," he whispered, consulting a worn, leather-bound map he'd produced from a waterproof pouch. It looked impossibly old, its parchment brittle, its markings in faded ink. "There's a reason these castles were built in such formidable locations, Sofia. Not just for defense, but for the secrets they hold within their foundations. Local folklore is often dismissed as superstition, but sometimes it's simply history veiled in myth." He pointed to a section of the map where faint, almost indistinguishable lines snaked away from the castle's perimeter, disappearing into the dense forest. The villagers, in times of displeasure from the Lord, spoke of a whisper path or the Serpent's Way, a hidden passage, not through the castle, but around its primary defenses. A way to come and go unseen when one did not wish to attract attention. When one wished to escape attention. Sofia looked from the map to the formidable castle, then back to the map. "You think Draculescu still uses it, or even knows about it?" "Perhaps not directly," Thomas mused, tracing the faint line with a calloused finger. "But the land remembers, the stones remember. And if it was ever a means of bypassing the main gates, then its purpose remains valid. He might have sealed it, but even a sealed door leaves a mark. It would have been used by those who feared the lord of the castle, precisely because it offered discretion. They packed their minimal gear, leaving the observation post as undisturbed as they'd found it. the cold bit sharper now, a gnawing chill that seemed to emanate from the very earth. They moved with extreme caution, Thomas leading the way with a small, specialized headlamp casting a narrow beam. The forest floor was a treacherous carpet of roots and fallen leaves, but Thomas navigated with an almost innate sense of direction, his academic mind now fully engaged in the primal task of tracking. After what felt like an eternity, he stopped, his headlamp illuminating a dense wall of ivy and thick undergrowth at the base of a towering moss-covered rock formation. This aligns with the old descriptions, a natural crevice, widened and concealed over centuries. See how the ivy grows unnaturally thick here? As if to deliberately obscure something. Sofia knelt, running her gloved fingers over the rough, damp rock. Beneath the layers of greenery, she felt a subtle, regular pattern in the stone. Not natural erosion, but carved, almost smoothed. "It feels worked," she confirmed, her voice barely a whisper. "Like masonry, but hidden." Thomas pushed aside a particularly heavy curtain of ivy, revealing a narrow, shadowed opening. It was barely wide enough for a person to squeeze through, leading into absolute darkness. A cold, earthy smell, distinct from the forest air, wafted out, carrying with it a faint, metallic tang that made Sofia's stomach clench. It was the same scent she'd noticed in Camilla's apartment, intensified, raw. "The Serpent's Way," Thomas said, his voice hushed with reverence and a touch of grim satisfaction. "The legend spoke of a place where the mountain breathed. This is it." Likely a natural cave system, expanded and reinforced. A back door to the castle's underbelly, perhaps even leading to its ancient dungeons or storage areas. A way in, undetected by his modern systems. They peered into the blackness, the beam of Thomas's headlamp swallowed almost immediately. The air was heavy, ancient and undeniably cold. A ripple of apprehension, potent and primal, ran through Sofia. This wasn't just a physical passage, it was a journey into the heart of the unknown, into the very roots of the evil they pursued. But it was their only way. "Plausible?" Thomas asked, though his tone suggested he already knew the answer. Sofia nodded, a fierce determination hardening her jaw. "More than plausible. It's a miracle, our only miracle." The dread was there, a cold knot in her stomach, but it was overshadowed by a surge of grim hope. They had found an entry point. Leaving the hidden passage for later, they returned to their observation post as the last vestiges of twilight faded, plunging the valley into a profound, inky blackness. The air grew still, the wind dying down, replaced by an unnerving quiet. Castelul Umbrelor was now a silhouette of deeper black against the star-strewn sky, its few illuminated windows glowing like malevolent eyes. Sofia resumed her vigil, binoculars fixed on the main gates, her breath fogging in the frigid air. The metallic scent from the cave passage still clung to her, a chilling reminder of the enemy's true nature. She felt a profound shift within her, a shedding of the last layers of scientific rationalism. Thomas's theories, once outlandish, were now the only lens through which to view this terrifying reality. She was ready for proof. She needed proof. And then, as if on cue, it happened. A low, almost imperceptible hum preceded its appearance. From within the castle's towering gates, a sleek, obsidian black car glided into view. It was a luxury vehicle, impossibly silent, its headlights piercing the darkness like predatory eyes. It moved with a grace that seemed to defy the rugged terrain, not a single pebble disturbed, not a whisper of engine noise. Sofia pressed the binoculars tighter to her eyes, focusing intently on the car as it reached the main road and turned, heading down into the valley. Even from this distance, she could make out the figures within. 3 of them, sitting with an unsettling stillness in the back seat. Lyra, Carpathian, Anya. Their faces, pale and ethereal even in the dim glow of the dashboard lights, were devoid of any normal human expression. There was no casual leaning, no turning of heads, no subtle adjustments of posture that would betray human comfort or boredom. They sat upright, perfectly poised, like exquisite ancient statues. As the car rounded a bend, the headlights briefly caught their eyes, and Sofia gasped, a sharp intake of cold air. Even through the powerful lenses, from hundreds of meters away she saw it, the unnerving reflection, not of light, but of something deeper, older, devoid of the familiar spark of human vitality. Their gaze, even in the briefest flash, seemed to pierce the darkness, to see beyond the confines of the vehicle, out into the vast watching night. Their movements were what truly shattered Sofia's remaining skepticism. As the car navigated a particularly sharp curve, a normal human body would sway however slightly, with the momentum. Not theirs. They remained perfectly rigid, unaffected, as if anchored to the very seats, an impossible grace that transcended physics. There was no flicker of a hand adjusting hair, no subtle shift in weight, no blink, just a chilling, profound stillness. They were not merely unmoving. They were unmovable asterisk, utterly serene in their defiance of human frailty. Thomas, who had been watching beside her without binoculars, spoke in a low, almost reverent tone. "Do you see it, Sofia? The complete lack of the mundane. No fidgeting, no casual glances out the window, no shared words. They are not merely passengers in a vehicle. They are passengers in the flow of time, indifferent to its petty currents." Sofia lowered the binoculars slowly, her hands trembling, not from cold, but from a profound, terrifying revelation. Her breath hitched in her throat. Her mind, once so meticulously ordered by science and logic, now reeled from the undeniable truth. Every impossible detail Thomas had described, every anomaly she had witnessed in Camilla, in the Obsidian mirror, in the club staff, it coalesced into a single horrifying, irrefutable fact. They were real, the legends were true, the creatures of myth, the ancient predators, existed. And three of them, perfectly adapted to the 21st century, had just left Draculescu's castle, gliding silently into the night. The Serpent's Way. The name itself was a whisper of ancient secrets, a thread pulled from the fabric of forgotten history, offering passage where no living soul was meant to tread. Sofia felt the chill of the night air, but a colder, more profound dread now warred with her iron resolve. They had bypassed the obvious guardian, the sentinel of shadows, only to face the true heart of the darkness. Each step towards the castle, now a hulking silhouette against the star-dusted velvet sky, was a commitment to an irreversible path. Inside those walls, a monstrous truth lay waiting, a truth far more terrible than any myth. No longer merely an investigation, this was a desperate dive into the abyss, a rescue mission for souls already teetering on the edge of the grave. They would navigate the castle's dusty arteries, its hidden passages and forgotten cells, hoping to find a flicker of their friends amidst the decay. But Thomas's research had hinted at something far grander, far more insidious than simple captivity. Draculescu offered not death but a twisted kind of eternal sign life asterisk, a horrifying commune where the price of immortality was one's very essence. As Sofia and Thomas melted into the deeper shadows, the looming castle seemed to breathe, a hungry maw waiting to consume them, promising them the blessings of eternity in return for their mortal souls. They would soon discover what such a blessing truly entailed. Chapter 9. The Commune of Eternity. The cold metallic tang that had haunted Sofia since Camilla's apartment now enveloped them fully as Thomas held back the dense curtain of ivy, revealing the true maw of the Serpent's Way. Inside, the air was heavy, a suffocating blend of damp earth and ancient stone, the blackness so absolute it swallowed Thomas's small flashlight beam within feet. Every cautious step into the castle's hidden arteries was a descent not just into physical darkness, but into the very heart of the horrific truth Draculescu promised as the Commune of Eternity. Sofia took a deep, steadying breath, the chill in the air doing little to calm the frantic beat of her heart. The scent, a cloying sweetness beneath the metallic tang, seemed to prickle at the back of her throat. "Are you certain about this, Thomas?" she whispered, her voice barely a breath. The words felt foolish even as she uttered them. There was no other way. They had seen the proof in the obsidian mirror, had nearly died on the mountain road. Doubt was a luxury they could no longer afford. "As certain as I can be without a blueprint," Thomas replied, his own whisper surprisingly calm, a comforting anchor in the oppressive gloom. He clicked on his small, powerful tactical flashlight, its beam a stark, narrow tunnel through the ancient dust motes dancing in the air. The light revealed walls of rough-hewn stone, streaked with mineral deposits, and a low, arched ceiling that seemed to press down on them. Most medieval castles, even those as heavily modernized as Castellulumbrelor, retained their older service routes. They were vital for discreet movement, especially during sieges, or for the staff to go about their duties unseen. He moved with a quiet expertise that belied his academic appearance, his tweed jacket, an incongruous sight in the subterranean passage. Sofia followed, her lean, athletic frame naturally adapting to the confined space, her hand brushing against the cold, clammy stone. The passage sloped downwards, the air growing denser, colder. The rhythmic drip of water echoed from somewhere deeper within, an unsettling metronome counting their trespass. After what felt like an eternity of silent navigation, punctuated only by their own measured breathing and the crunch of ancient grit beneath their boots, Thomas paused. His light played over a section of the wall, revealing not stone, but a heavily braced wooden door, ancient iron hinges thick with rust. "Servants? Entrance to the lower kitchens, I'd wager," Thomas murmured, his fingers tracing the outline of a faded, almost illegible symbol carved into the wood. A private route for provisions or a discreet exit for those who weren't meant to be seen departing. The latter thought hung heavy in the air. He produced a small, intricate lock-picking set, his grey hair falling forward as he bent to his task. The faint metallic clicks were the only sound, each one amplified by the tomb-like silence of the passage. Sofia stood sentinel, her senses stretched taut. The stillness felt unnatural, a held breath before a scream. Was Draculescu truly so confident in his psychological barriers that he left these physical ones unguarded? Or were the real guards simply invisible to them? Then, a new sound, faint but unmistakable, drifted from somewhere beyond the door. A whisper, low and guttural, too indistinct to make out words, but undeniably human. Or, what sounded *human? It was followed by a soft, dragging noise, like something heavy being pulled across a stone floor. Sofia's blood ran cold. Thomas froze, his head cocked, listening. His eyes met Sofia's, a silent confirmation of what they'd both heard. The tension in the air ratcheted up, a taut wire humming with impending dread. He returned to the lock, working faster now. A bead of sweat, tracing a path down his temple. With a soft, almost imperceptible click, the lock gave way. Thomas eased the heavy door open, revealing not a bustling kitchen, but another dark, dusty corridor. The air here was even colder, a stagnant chill that penetrated Sofia's bones. The whispering sound had ceased, but the dragging noise seemed to echo from further down the passage, now accompanied by a faint, sickly sweet scent that made Sofia's stomach clench. "This way," Thomas breathed, stepping through, his flashlight beam sweeping ahead. They moved like shadows through the labyrinthine passages. This was clearly the forgotten heart of the castle, a network of service corridors, cold storage rooms, and what looked like ancient cellars. Dust motes danced in the sparse beam of light, thick as snow. Cobwebs, undisturbed for decades, stretched across every archway, glistening like silver silk. Sofia's practical boots kicked up fine powder from the floor, and she fought the urge to cough. Each step felt like a desecration, a violation of the castle's ancient slumber. The metallic tang intensified, growing richer, almost coppery, as they ventured deeper. It mingled with the sweet, cloying aroma Sofia remembered from Camilla's apartment, now disturbingly stronger. Thomas paused, his light illuminating a series of heavy wooden doors set into the stone walls, each one reinforced with iron bands and secured by massive rusting padlocks. These were likely dungeons or storage for highly valuable goods back in the day, Thomas murmured, his voice hushed. The placement is consistent with a hidden wing. Sofia felt a tremor of dread run through her. This wasn't just storage. The air was charged with a palpable sense of suffering, a lingering echo of pain that permeated the very stone. The dragging sound had faded, replaced by an unsettling, profound silence, broken only by a shallow, rhythmic wheezing. Thomas tried the handle of one of the doors. It was locked. He moved to the next. Then the next. Each was impenetrable. Too much noise to pick these without drawing attention, he whispered, his brow furrowed. Suddenly, a faint, almost imperceptible sliver of light appeared from beneath one of the doors. The fourth one down, on the left. Thomas extinguished his flashlight immediately. They pressed themselves against the rough stone wall, listening. From behind that door a soft, almost ethereal hum began, like a distant, distorted lullaby. Thomas crept forward, Sofia close behind. He knelt, peering through the crack. Sofia knelt beside him, her heart thumping against her ribs. What they saw inside made her breath hitch. The room was vast, surprisingly high-ceilinged and bathed in a dim, purple-tinged light that seemed to emanate from glowing panels in the walls. It was opulent, yet chillingly clinical, like a designer prison. Plush, velvet-covered armchairs and chaise lounges were scattered across a thick Persian rug, but their luxury was utterly negated by the gaunt, listless figures slumped upon them. Sofia's gaze immediately found her. Camilla, her best friend, once so vibrant and full of life, was a ghost. She was draped across a chaise lounge. Her elegant dress, a familiar shade of deep emerald, now hung loosely on her emaciated frame. Her skin was ashen, almost translucent, stretched taut over prominent cheekbones. Her lips, usually full and expressive, were thin and pale. But it was her eyes that truly horrified Sofia. They were wide, unfocused, a startling, vivid blue in her spectral face, but utterly devoid of recognition, of life, of Camilla. They reflected the purple light with a disturbing, glassy serenity, a beatific, vacant stare that tore at Sofia's soul. A ragged, desperate sob caught in Sofia's throat, but she forced it back, clenching her jaw until her teeth ached. Fury, cold and searing, ignited within her, momentarily eclipsing the crushing grief. Beside Camilla, slumped in an armchair, was Daniel Hughes. He was similarly gaunt, his usually neatly styled hair a mess, his expensive suit rumpled and stained. His face, etched with a disturbing placidity, mirrored Camilla's vacant serenity. His eyes, fixed on some unseen point in the distance, held the same chilling emptiness. He was utterly broken. Around them, a dozen other individuals, both men and women, sat or lay in similar states, some stirring faintly, others utterly still. They were all young, all once beautiful, their features now distorted by extreme emaciation, yet possessing that same unsettling ethereal glow that Sofia had first noticed in Camilla at the Obsidian mirror. The metallic sweet scent in the air was strongest here, almost overwhelming, sickly and rich. Thomas gripped Sofia's arm, his touch firm but gentle, pulling her back from the crack. He knew what she was feeling, the raw, visceral pain of witnessing such desecration. "They're partially turned," Thomas whispered, his voice low and grave. "Their will is completely broken. Draculescu keeps them in this state, barely alive, barely dead. It's a holding pattern. They're sustained by infrequent feedings, just enough to keep the transformation incomplete, to keep them malleable and eternally subservient. Feedings? Sofia choked out, the word tasting like ash. Thomas nodded, his face grim. Yes. Their own life force is drained, replaced by his. They are empty vessels, waiting to be fully completed. This is the commune of eternity, Sofia. Not a community, but a collection, a harvest, a grotesque mockery of paradise. Righteous fury pulsed through Sofia. This wasn't just monstrous, it was an insult to humanity, to art, to everything she held dear. Her investigative resolve hardened into a desperate, unyielding commitment. She would rescue them. At Swens to Sida tan any asterisk cost. But first, she needed to understand the full scope of the horror. They retraced their steps, avoiding the specific door, moving further down the corridor. Thomas's knowledge of historical castle layouts proved invaluable once more. This wing would have connected to the upper levels through a service staircase, likely to the grand halls. He explained, his voice low. It would allow staff to prepare for functions, without being seen by guests, until the appropriate moment. Sure enough, after navigating another series of passages and a tight, winding stone staircase, they found themselves at the entrance to a narrow, darkened gallery overlooking what could only be the grand hall. Thomas melted into the shadows of a hidden alcove, pulling Sofia with him. From this vantage point, concealed behind a tapestry, they had a clear, unobstructed view of the scene below. The grand hall was breathtaking, a symphony of ancient Gothic grandeur and modern opulent design. Soaring arched ceilings, intricate stained glass windows depicting obscure allegorical scenes and walls adorned with priceless tapestries and paintings, created an atmosphere of sublime beauty. But the light here was different, not the purple glow of the hidden wing, but a warm, flickering candlelight that cast long, dancing shadows, giving everything an eerie, animated quality. At the center of the hall, seated on a massive, intricately carved throne, was Vladislav Draculescu. He was magnificent, an aura of ancient power and refined charisma radiating from him. He wore a dark velvet jacket tailored to perfection, the candlelight catching the subtle sheen of the fabric. His face was a mask of serene command, his eyes, like obsidian mirrors themselves, fixed on the single figure kneeling before him. The figure was a young woman, perhaps in her early 20s, dressed in a simple, flowing white gown. She was beautiful, her dark hair cascading around her, her face a picture of innocent vulnerability, but her eyes, though wide and focused on Draculescu, held the same distant, mesmerizing haze Sofia had seen in Daniel and Camilla, a precursor to the emptiness. She was clearly the new human victim. Surrounding Draculescu, arranged in a semicircle of rapt attention, were his fully turned vampiric disciples. Lyra, Kaelan, and Anya were among them, their unnerving beauty amplified by the candlelight, their skin appearing almost luminous. But they were not alone. There were perhaps a dozen others, both men and women, all impossibly beautiful, their movements fluid and silent, their expressions serene but utterly soulless. Their eyes, dark and ancient, reflected the candlelight without warmth, like chips of polished stone. They were the terrifying embodiment of Draculescu's vision, eternally young, eternally beautiful, eternally subservient. Draculescu began to speak, his voice a mesmerizing baritone that seemed to ripple through the very air, imbued with an ancient resonance that bypassed logic and went straight to the soul. "My dear child," he began, his gaze piercing the young woman kneeling before him, "you stand on the precipice of true understanding. You have seen the illusions of mortal life, the fleeting nature of its joys, the crushing weight of its inevitable decay." His voice was hypnotic, a silken cord drawing her deeper into his web. "They call it living, Yet what is it but a slow, agonizing slide into oblivion? A life bound by the frailties of flesh, the dictates of a fleeting heartbeat. He gestured around the hall, his hand sweeping over his disciples. Look upon my chosen. Do you see suffering? Do you see fear? No. Only peace. Only certainty. They have shed the mortal burdens, the trivial attachments, the ephemeral struggles that plague humanity. His eyes gleamed, fixing on the young woman. You are an artist, yes. You seek to create, to leave a mark, to grasp at something eternal. But true eternity, my child, is not found in the brushstroke or the sculpted form. It is found in Siddha being, in becoming something beyond the comprehension of your fading world. He rose from his throne, moving with an impossible grace that belied his ancient age, circling the kneeling victim. I offer you not a path to greatness, but greatness itself. I offer you the ultimate freedom, release from the limitations of the flesh, the tyranny of time, the blessing of eternity. To join the commune of eternity is to transcend, to evolve, to partake in the art of existence beyond mortality. It is a privilege, a metamorphosis into a higher state of being. The young woman's eyes were wide, fixed on him with a devotion that chilled Sofia to the bone. She swayed slightly, a tremor running through her, but she did not break his gaze. Draculescu held out a hand, his touch impossibly light as he caressed her cheek. Sofia's blood ran cold, a glacial torrent in her veins. The Sanguine Ascent. The very name was a death knell, echoing Thomas's grim warning about an abandoned Soviet sanatorium, a place he'd described with chilling irony as a monument to decaying grandeur and vampiric rebirth, a crucible where ideology had once twisted souls, now repurposed for something far more ancient and sinister. This wasn't merely a conversion camp, but the final, irreversible descent into Draculescu's chilling commune of eternity, where Camilla and Daniel would shed their last vestiges of humanity forever. A desperate, immediate race against time had just begun, but the true terror was the unknown clock ticking within the castle walls. They were to be moved. Soon. The words echoed, a phantom whisper of Draculescu's cold promise, compelling Sofia to push past terror, to move now. Before the night surrendered to dawn, before the last threads of hope frayed entirely, she had to somehow, impossibly, reach that desolate mountain peak and reclaim them from the jaws of eternity. Chapter 10. The Sanguine Ascent. The Sanguine Ascent. The name, echoing Draculescu's chilling pronouncement, had galvanized Sofia into a singular, icy fury, overriding every last vestige of terror. Thomas, sensing her profound shift, wasted no second, pulling her from the hidden gallery and plunging them deeper into the castle's unseen veins, a network of cold, narrow service routes that branched like diseased arteries. Their desperate search for an exit, for any path that might somehow lead them to that desolate mountain peak, became a silent, breathless race against the unknown clock ticking within the fortress walls. Every shadow now seemed to hold a new threat, every distant echo a footstep, as they pushed onward, compelled by a fierce, singular purpose. The air in the labyrinthine passages grew colder, a damp, subterranean chill that seeped into their bones. The stones here were rough-hewn, centuries older than the polished surfaces of the grand hall, smelling of earth and damp rock. Thomas moved with an almost uncanny familiarity, his large hand a reassuring anchor on Sofia's arm as he navigated twists and turns that seemed designed to disorient. He didn't hesitate, pulling her through archways too low for him to stand upright, squeezing them past collapsed sections where ancient masonry had finally succumbed to the mountain's embrace. Sofia's lungs burned, her heart a frantic drum against her ribs, but the image of Camilla's vacant eyes, of Daniel's gaunt face, fueled every strained muscle, every desperate breath. They thought they were alone, deep in the castle's hidden underbelly, but then, a distant thrum of voices vibrated through the stone, growing steadily clearer. Thomas froze, pressing a finger to his lips, and pulled Sofia into a shadowed alcove behind a massive, rusted iron grate. The grate, thick with cobwebs and cold to the touch, allowed a narrow, obscured view into a high-ceilinged chamber beyond, dimly lit by what looked like an array of ancient lanterns, their flames unnaturally steady. From their hiding place, Sofia and Thomas could hear them. Draculescu's voice, unmistakable in its silken cadence, and the sibilant replies of his 3 lieutenants. A necessary evolution. Draculescu's voice resonated, rich and deep, carrying a subtle, hypnotic undertone even in conversation. He wasn't visible, but his presence dominated the space they were observing. Castellul Umbrelor serves its purpose. The breaking, the initial awakening. But the true embrace of eternity, the final conditioning, that requires a different sanctuary. Anya's voice, light and cold as glass, responded. "And the Sanguine Ascent is prepared, my lord?" "Of course," Draculescu purred, a sound that made the hairs on Sofia's arms stand on end. Generations of human despair, of wasted potential, have infused its very stones. A Soviet relic, built to mend what could not be mended, now repurposed to transcend what was never meant to be transcended. Irony, my dears, is often the most potent of energies. Sofia gripped Thomas's arm, her knuckles white. She could hear the casual cruelty in his voice, the detached amusement. "The new harvest is rich, Lord." Lyra's voice chimed in, more resonant than Anya's, a predatory hum beneath her words. "Many promising souls." "Indeed," Draculescu agreed. "Our British art dealer Daniel, a mind of considerable depth, now perfectly pliable. And the journalist's friend, Camilla, her spirit, though initially resistant, will prove profoundly loyal once fully transformed. Their wills are sufficiently fractured. They will be transferred with the next group, at dawn. The Sanguine Ascent awaits their true awakening." Sofia's breath hitched at dawn. That meant now. Soon. She glanced at Thomas, whose face was grim, eyes narrowed in furious concentration. The information was vital, but the timeline was a knife to the gut. Camilla and Daniel were so close, yet still so far, still held in Draculescu's chilling grasp, awaiting an irreversible fate. The ascent itself will be illuminating for them. Kaelin's voice, slightly deeper, almost masculine in its timbre, mused. A journey from the shadows of mortal thought to the dawn of true awareness. A chill, colder than the subterranean air, seeped into Sofia. True awareness, a hollow, horrifying mockery. They weren't talking about enlightenment. They were talking about complete, absolute surrender. The sanatorium's previous tenants sought to cure the body. Draculescu continued, a note of dark amusement in his voice. "We, my loyal companions, seek to cure the soul of its mortality, to uplift it, to elevate it beyond the petty concerns of human existence. Soon, the Commune of Eternity will welcome its newest, brightest stars." A shiver ran down Sofia's spine, mingling with her fury. He called them stars, but they were merely fodder, resources, stripped of identity, robbed of choice. This wasn't salvation, it was consumption on an eternal, horrifying scale. Thomas subtly tugged at her arm, a silent signal to withdraw. They had heard enough. More than enough. The urgency of their escape from the castle had just intensified 1,000-fold. They had to get to the Sanguine Ascent before Draculescu's victims were moved. As they began to silently back away from the grate, the ancient iron groaned faintly under Sofia's weight. It was barely a whisper, a rustle of ancient metal, yet in the unnaturally silent castle, it was a siren's call. Inside the chamber the conversation instantly ceased. A profound, unnatural stillness descended. Sofia's blood ran cold. Then, a voice, closer this time, dangerously calm. It was Lyra. "My lord, we are not alone. A guttural growl followed from the shadows beyond the grate, and Sofia knew, with a primal certainty, that Draculescu was now aware of their presence. "Behind you, now! Asterisk," Thomas hissed, shoving Sofia forward, his voice a low, urgent rasp. They scrambled back into the dark passage, the clatter of Sofia's boot against a loose stone echoing like a gunshot. Behind them, a shadow detached itself from the gloom of the chamber, not walking, but nymestindabation unfurling with impossible speed. Lyra. Her presence filled the narrow corridor, though Sofia only caught a glimpse. A flash of pale skin, eyes that seemed to drink the meager light, and a mouth curved in a silent, predatory smile. Lyra moved with a fluidity that defied physics, her progress less a run, and more an instant materialization from point to point. One moment she was meters behind them, the next, her cold breath ghosted Sofia's neck. "Run, Sofia!" Thomas roared, pushing her harder. Sofia didn't need to be told twice. Fear, raw and visceral, coursed through her, but it was now laced with an equally potent surge of adrenaline. This wasn't a game, not a theory. This was a monster, real and terrifying at her heels. She pumped her arms, her lean body stretching, drawing on every ounce of strength she possessed. The dark passages blurred around her. Thomas, despite his age, was surprisingly agile, guiding her with shouts and shoves through the labyrinth. Left here, narrow gap, duck low. They plunged through a crumbling archway, Sofia scraping her shoulder on the rough stone. Behind them they heard a sickening courtyard asterisk as Lyra hit the archway, not slowing, not breaking stride, but simply shebounding with impossible force, her pursuit relentless. She was faster than anything Sofia had ever encountered, a blur of motion in the periphery of her vision. "She's gaining," Sofia gasped, her lungs burning, the metallic tang of fear thick in her mouth. "There." Thomas pointed to a heavy wooden door, ancient and studded with iron, half hidden behind a fallen section of wall. "The old armory entrance." Sofia threw herself at it, pushing with all her might. The wood groaned, stiff with ages of disuse. Lyra was upon them, a shadow extending, her hand reaching out, long, pale fingers tipped with something sharp and gleaming. Sofia felt a searing pain as those claws raked her backpack, tearing through the fabric. With a final, desperate shove, Sofia and Thomas burst through the door, staggering into a larger, echoing space. It was the armory, filled with rusted weapons and decaying banners. Without a moment's hesitation, Sofia grabbed a heavy, corroded breastplate from a stand and hurled it back towards the door, just as Lyra lunged through. The metal clanged off the vampire's shoulder with a deafening crash, momentarily staggering her. It wasn't enough to hurt, but it bought them a precious second. "The grate, the ventilation shaft," Thomas yelled, pointing to a high, narrow opening near the ceiling, covered by a fragile, rusted grate. "Are you mad?" Sofia cried, but she was already scrambling up a stack of old wooden crates, her muscles screaming in protest. The breastplate clattered uselessly to the floor as Lyra regained her balance, her eyes burning like embers in the dim light. A low snarl ripped from her throat. Sofia reached the grate, tugging at the corroded metal. It held fast. Lyra launched herself upwards, a blur of motion, her movements shockingly powerful. Sofia could feel the vibrations of her leap, the suction of displaced air. "Push!" Thomas shouted from below, steadying the crates. "Asterisk! Push! Asterisk!" Sofia kicked with all her strength, her boot connecting with the rusted bars. With a screech of metal, the grate buckled and then ripped free, showering them with dust and rust flakes. She squeezed through the narrow opening, her body aching, her tactical jacket snagging on a jagged edge. Thomas was right behind her, his surprisingly powerful build somehow contorting to fit. They scrambled into the cramped, dark ventilation shaft, the air thick with the smell of dust and stagnant metal. Below, Lyra shrieked, a sound that was less human and more like a predator denied its prey. It vibrated through the metal shaft, a raw, terrifying expression of pure, ancient fury. "Keep moving," Thomas urged, crawling forward on his hands and knees. "She won't be able to follow us in here, not with her size." He didn't elaborate, but Sofia understood. The vampires were too refined, too elegant, too perfectly formed to fit into such a crude, confined space. It was a weakness she would exploit again, if given the chance. They crawled for what felt like an eternity, the rough metal scraping against their clothes, dust clogging their throats. The shaft twisted, turned, and eventually opened into a vertical chute. Thomas, always prepared, pulled a length of climbing rope from his pack, quickly securing it to a sturdy beam. "This leads to an old service entrance, hidden by the overgrown gardens," he explained, his voice hushed. "The Serpent's Way branches off from here." Sofia didn't hesitate. She grabbed the rope, her hands raw, and began the descent, her heart still hammering with residual terror and a fresh surge of desperate resolve. She was no longer just an investigator, she was a fighter. She trusted Thomas implicitly, her life literally in his hands. He was calm, focused, a rock of knowledge and experience against this ancient evil. He joined her a moment later, rappelling down the rope with practiced ease. They emerged into the night, gasping for the cool, clean mountain air. The castle, Castilul Umbrelor, loomed behind them, its Gothic spires black against the velvet sky, a silent, menacing silhouette. The air around it felt heavy, watchful. They had escaped, but only just. "No time to rest," Thomas said, his breath plumbing in the frigid air. He glanced at the eastern horizon, where the faintest hint of gray was beginning to stain the inky blackness. "Dawn is coming, and with it, their transfer." Sofia nodded, her jaw set. Her legs ached, her muscles screamed, and her shoulder throbbed where it had hit the stone, but she pushed it all down. "Camilla, Daniel, the Sanguine Ascent," she said, her voice hoarse. "Where is it?" Thomas pointed, his arm a rigid line towards a distant, higher ridge, barely visible against the star-dusted sky. "Due east, further into the Carpathians. It's an old Soviet-era sanatorium, vast, sprawling, built during the communist era as a healing retreat for party officials. After the fall, it was abandoned, left to decay." He started to move, not waiting, his pace surprisingly strong as he began to climb the treacherous, upward-sloping mountain path. Sofia followed, matching his stride. The ground was uneven, strewn with loose rocks and thorny scrub, hidden roots ready to trip them in the darkness. "Why there?" Sofia asked, breathless. "Isolation first and foremost," Thomas explained, his words clipped, each breath visible in the cold air. "It's deep in the wilderness, difficult to access, and even more difficult to leave. Perfect for holding the newly turned, and its history. The Soviets used it, in its later years, for certain experiments on dissidents, re-education, through pharmaceutical means. A place of involuntary human conditioning. Draculescu, no doubt, found the irony delicious. And its structure, built like a fortress, designed for internal control, not external assault. He's repurposed it into his commune of eternity, for those who have reached their final stage of ascension. The name, the Sanguine Ascent, made perfect, horrifying sense now. A blood-soaked rise, a bloody path to a false eternity. Sofia stumbled on a loose rock, catching herself just before she fell. Her legs were heavy, her lungs burning with the effort, but the thought of Camilla and Daniel being taken there, to that place of final, irreversible transformation, spurred her onward. She focused on the faint, distant ridge, willing herself forward. Above them, the sky was slowly, inexorably lightening. The stars began to recede, replaced by a pale, pearlescent glow spreading across the horizon. Dawn. It was coming too fast. As they pushed higher, The wind picked up, carrying with it a faint, almost imperceptible hum. It wasn't natural. Sofia strained her ears, and then she heard it more clearly, the distant, rhythmic thrumming of heavy vehicles. Not a car on a road, but something more substantial, more industrial. It sounded like it was coming from the direction of Castellul Umbrelor, heading east, towards the ridge. "They're already moving them," Sofia whispered, a fresh wave of panic gripping her. Her voice was raw with desperation. The last, desperate scramble brought them not to a peaceful summit, but to the precipice of a nightmare. The Sanguine Ascent, a skeletal leviathan of concrete and rusted iron, clawed at the nascent dawn, its shattered windows like empty eyes staring into the cold, indifferent light. Sofia's ragged breath hitched, the question, were they too late, violently answered by the sight below. Hundreds of figures, pale and gaunt, yet moving with an unnatural synchronized grace, filled the vast crumbling courtyard. They were here, waiting, already transformed. Among them, Sofia's gut clenched with a cold, piercing dread. She recognized the vacant stare, the chilling beauty of Camilla's face, beside Daniel's equally empty gaze. The sun, a sliver of bloody gold on the horizon, was not their salvation, but merely the curtain rising on a final, impossible act. This wasn't just a rescue, it was a reckoning. Chapter 11. Dawn's Reckoning. The word reckoning felt like a hammer blow against Sofia's ribs, twisting the despair in her gut into something cold and sharp. Her gaze, raw with terror, darted from Camilla to Daniel, their vacant eyes reflecting the nascent dawn like polished obsidian, their forms moving with the unnatural synchronized grace of the hundreds filling the Sanguine Ascent's vast, crumbling courtyard. The chilling truth, worse than any nightmare, stole her breath. Draculescu's true awakening had already begun. The low thrum of the approaching heavy vehicles, previously a distant warning, now vibrated through the very rock beneath their feet, confirming the transfers were complete. Thomas tightened his grip on her arm, his face grim as his eyes swept the skeletal leviathan of concrete and rusted iron. The sun, a sliver of bloody gold, was not their salvation but merely the curtain rising on a final, impossible act, and they were standing center stage. They had pushed through the final kilometers of the treacherous climb in a blur of desperate effort, their lungs burning, muscles screaming. The air, thin and cold, tasted of pine and an acrid metallic tang that Sofia now recognized as the scent of the Commune, the very same unsettling odor that had permeated Camilla's apartment. Before them, silhouetted against the bruised purple and growing orange of the pre-dawn sky, stood the Sanguine Ascent. It was less a building, more a monstrous scar on the mountain's face, a colossal brutalist edifice of decaying concrete, broken windows like vacant eyes, and rusted rebar reaching like skeletal fingers towards the sky. The imposing, fortress-like structure, a relic of Soviet ambition, hummed with a perverse, quiet energy, and within its crumbling courtyard, a terrifying spectacle unfolded. Hundreds of figures, impossibly still, impossibly silent, were arranged in concentric circles. They were young, beautiful, their features sharpened, eyes unnaturally bright in the dim light. Their movements, when they occurred, were eerily fluid, synchronized, a grotesque ballet of perfect stillness and sudden, silent grace. It was the Commune of eternity, a chilling tableau of lives stolen, souls extinguished. Sofia's heart lurched. Her eyes, frantic, scanned the ranks, her breath catching in her throat as she found them. Camilla. Daniel. They were near the front, standing side by side, their forms gaunt, delicate, almost translucent in the fading gloom. Camilla's once vibrant auburn hair now hung lank, her skin a pallid white. Daniel, usually so meticulous, looked spectral, his bespoke suit clinging to a frame that was now little more than bone. Their faces, though, were the most horrifying. The spark of personality, the flicker of thought, the unique light of their humanity, all gone. Their eyes, wide and empty, stared straight ahead, reflecting the nascent dawn like polished obsidian, indistinguishable from the other thralls. They're gone," Sofia whispered, the words ragged, tearing at her throat. "He did it. He finished them." The despair, thick and suffocating, threatened to consume her. This wasn't Camilla. It was an exquisitely crafted husk, a beautiful, empty vessel. Thomas squeezed her arm again. "Not entirely, Sofia, not yet. A shell, yes, but the essence. There's still a chance. Draculescu has to complete the final conditioning himself. This is the harvest, but not the final consumption." His voice, though strained, held a thread of his usual academic certainty. "We have to move." As if on cue, a figure emerged from the central gaping maw of the sanatorium's entrance. Vladislav Draculescu. He moved with an effortless power, clad in a long, dark coat that seemed to absorb the light. His charisma, usually so carefully cultivated, now radiated a raw, untamed authority. His gaze, sharp as broken glass, swept over his commune, a silent command passing between predator and prey. Then, as if sensing the faint tremor of their hidden presence, his head slowly turned. His eyes, inhumanly perceptive, locked onto their position amongst the rocks and scrub pines. A slow, predatory smile spread across his face, not charming, but utterly chilling. He raised a hand, and with an eerie, guttural whisper that seemed to ripple through the very air, the hundreds of figures in the courtyard stirred. Their collective heads turned, their vacant eyes fixing on Sofia and Thomas. The silent, beautiful thralls began to move, a slow, inexorable tide of inhumanity. "Now, Sofia," Thomas hissed, pulling her from behind their rocky cover. "Run! The courtyard will split their attention." Panic flared, sharp and cold, but Sofia forced it down. This was it. No more hiding, no more observation, just the brutal, terrifying reality of the fight. She clutched the pistol she had carried, a small, cold comfort in her shaking hand, and sprinted down the rocky incline towards the crumbling perimeter of the sanatorium. Thomas, surprisingly agile despite his age, kept pace beside her. As they burst into the vast, open courtyard, the air crackled. Draculescu's voice, now a resonant boom, echoed across the ruins. So, the little mouse and her pet scholar finally show themselves. "Did you truly believe your pathetic resistance would go unnoticed?" He gestured grandly. "Lyra, Kaelin, Anya, and the rest of my children, entertain our guests. Show them the true meaning of eternity." From within the ranks of the commune, 3 figures detached themselves, moving with impossible speed and grace. Lyra, Kaelin, and Anya, Draculescu's lieutenants, their faces set in expressions of icy fury, darted forward, leaving trails of blurred movement. Behind them, the larger mass of commune members, the partially turned, surged, a wave of pale, silent predators. Sofia raised her pistol, a desperate, almost instinctive act. She aimed at Lyra, the closest, and fired. The shot cracked, sharp and incongruous in the silence of the dawn. The bullet struck Lyra square in the chest, but instead of falling, Lyra merely staggered, a faint ripple disturbing her pale skin before her form solidified, completely unharmed. She smirked, a flash of something ancient and terrible in her eyes, and continued her charge. "Useless! Modern weapons are useless!" Thomas roared, his voice cutting through the ringing in Sofia's ears. He was already fumbling with his backpack, pulling out a small, heavy flask and a coil of thin rope. They passed through them like mist. Focus, improvise, ancient methods. Lyra was upon them, her pale hand reaching for Sofia's throat. Sofia dodged, the ancient, sickly sweet scent of her enemy overwhelming her senses. Kaelin and Anya were closing in, their movements a blur. "Wood!" Thomas shouted, his voice a surprising bellow. "Find wood! Sharpen it!" He snapped a thick branch from a fallen aspen sapling, tearing at its bark with surprising strength, revealing the pale, sacred wood beneath. This is what they fear." Sofia's mind, usually so logical, scrambled to keep up. Scientific skepticism for so long her shield crumbled completely. She saw a splintered length of timber, part of a collapsed beam, jutting from a pile of rubble. She scrambled towards it, Lyra's enraged hiss close behind. Grabbing the jagged wood, she snapped off a manageable piece, its end already sharpened by its violent breakage. "The holy water!" Thomas shouted, uncorking his flask. He flung a few drops at Anya, who shrieked as if scalded, recoiling instinctively. "Symbols of faith, Sofia, anything!" The fight became a blur of desperate improvisation. Sofia, fueled by a rage so profound it transcended her fear, fought with a feral intensity she didn't know she possessed. She ducked under Anya's clawing attack, sweeping the sharpened wood low, feeling the barest whisper of resistance as it grazed the vampire's leg. Anya hissed, a sound like dry leaves, but was clearly uninjured. "Not just graze," Thomas yelled, parrying a blow from Kaelin with his own crude aspen stake, the wood splintering slightly. "It must be deep, through the heart, or direct sunlight." The hundreds of Commune members, less agile than the lieutenants, began to swarm. Sofia found herself surrounded, a maelstrom of pale faces and unnervingly silent movements. She swung her makeshift aspen stake, her movements clumsy at first, but driven by a burgeoning inner strength. She wasn't just fighting for her life, she was fighting for Camilla's memory, for Daniel's lost future. The scientific journalist was gone, replaced by a warrior of faith and fury. She saw Camilla amongst the horde, her eyes still vacant, her movements robotic. A wave of profound grief threatened to overwhelm her, but Sofia channeled it. "You won't have her!" she screamed, a raw, primal cry that echoed through the crumbling sanatorium. Thomas, though physically outmatched, moved with an almost mystical agility, his knowledge proving to be their truest weapon. He drew an ancient cross in the dust with his finger, and a group of advancing thralls recoiled, their movements momentarily faltering. He splashed holy water, buying them precious seconds. Lyra, her eyes burning with cold hatred, lunged at Sofia. This time, Sofia was ready. She met the attack, driving the aspen stake forward with all her weight, aiming for the shadowy figure's chest. Lyra, incredibly fast, twisted, but Sofia's momentum was too great. The rough wood scraped against bone, then plunged deep into Lyra's shoulder. A shriek of pure ancient agony tore from Lyra's throat, a sound that seemed to suck the air from the courtyard. Black smoke, foul and acrid, curled from the wound as Lyra stumbled back, clutching her smoking shoulder. The pain was real. The ancient methods worked. "Yes, Sofia!" Thomas roared, a triumphant if weary sound. "Keep pushing!" Kaelin and Anya, seeing their sister wounded, attacked with renewed ferocity, but Sofia had found her rhythm, a savage dance of desperate defense and furious offense. She jabbed, parried, and dodged, her eyes no longer seeing them as ethereal models but as what they were, ancient predators, vulnerable only to ancient truths. They fought their way through the outer courtyard, leaving several lesser vampires hissing and recoiling from splashes of holy water, or the mere presence of the aspenwood. The goal was the main hall, where Draculescu presided. They knew it instinctively. Bursting through a set of crumbling ornate doors, they found themselves in a cavernous space. The main hall of the Sanguine Ascent was a monument to decaying grandeur, a vast echoing chamber with a collapsed ceiling in places, revealing patches of the lightening sky. A central dais, once perhaps for Soviet dignitaries, now served as Draculescu's stage. He stood there, magnificent and terrible, his charisma no longer a mask but a weapon, pulsating with raw, concentrated power. He had discarded his earlier elegant pretense, his face a mask of primal fury, his eyes glowing with an internal, hellish fire. The remaining Commune members, the more thoroughly turned, stood silently around him, like an ancient undead guard. Camilla and Daniel were among them, their forms unnervingly close to Draculescu, their empty eyes still reflecting the burgeoning light. "You dare," Draculescu hissed, his voice a low growl that vibrated through the very stones. "You dare defile this place, this sacred threshold of true existence, with your pathetic mortal scent, your laughable faith." He extended a hand, and Sofia felt a sudden crushing weight, as if invisible chains were binding her, trying to steal her will. His eyes were hypnotizing, drawing her in, promising oblivion. "Resist, Sofia, focus!" Thomas cried, struggling against an unseen force that sought to pin him to the ground. He clutched his small flask, muttering prayers in Latin. Sofia fought the mesmerizing power, images of Camilla's vibrant smile, Daniel's intelligent eyes, flashing through her mind. This was the man who had stolen them, twisted them into these empty shells. Her fury, cold and pure, became a shield. She tightened her grip on the aspen stake. Draculescu snarled, abandoning the subtle manipulation. He moved, a black blur, closing the distance between them with terrifying speed. His physical power was immense. He aimed a blow at Thomas, a strike meant to shatter bone. Sofia reacted instinctively, pushing Thomas aside, taking the brunt of Draculescu's attention. "You fight for lost causes, little human?" Draculescu mocked, his voice a venomous whisper, his face inches from hers. "Look at them," he gestured to Camilla and Daniel. "They are free, free from the pain, the doubt, the tedious triviality of mortal life. They will serve me eternally, beautifully." He seized her wrist, his grip like iron bands, slowly crushing the bones. "Your friend, Camilla, already forgets your name. Her memories are but shadows, soon to be purged entirely. Her soul, Sofia, is mine." The taunt, cruel and deliberate, pierced through Sofia's defenses. A sob caught in her throat, but it was quickly swallowed by a surge of pure, unadulterated rage. This monster would not break her. This monster would not have Camilla's soul. "No!" she screamed, a guttural sound torn from the deepest part of her being. "You don't get to decide. She is not yours." A surge of power, not physical but spiritual, coursed through Sofia. The scientific journalist who had always sought empirical proof now found herself drawing on a reservoir of defiant faith, a belief in something greater than the darkness. She twisted her body, using the pain in her wrist to fuel her struggle. With a desperate heave, she broke free from his grip. Draculescu, surprised by her sudden burst of strength, recoiled slightly. It was all the opening Sofia needed. She launched herself forward, not with grace, but with the brutal, single-minded focus of a cornered animal. The aspen stake, rough and unadorned, became an extension of her will. "You will not have them!" she cried, her voice raw. She lunged, aiming not with precision, but with the full force of her conviction, her grief, her fury, and her newfound desperate faith. At that exact moment, the first direct rays of the rising sun, a fiery spear of golden light, pierced through a gap in the collapsed roof of the main hall, striking the dais. The light, pure and incandescent, fell directly upon Draculescu, illuminating him in stark, brutal clarity. He shrieked, a sound of ancient terrible agony that defied description, a sound of millennia of darkness being ripped apart. His eyes, fixed on the approaching aspen, widened in dawning horror. Sofia, driven by an almost superhuman strength, plunged the stake forward. It struck Draculescu's chest, the sacred aspen wood sinking deep into his ancient, corrupted heart. The scream intensified, echoing through the crumbling hall, shaking the very foundations of the sanatorium. Draculescu convulsed, his form writhing, his elegant features twisting into a mask of unspeakable torment. Black smoke billowed from his body, thick and foul, reeking of sulfur and decay. The direct sunlight, combined with the aspen stake, was too much. His body began to disintegrate, first his hands, then his face, crumbling like ancient parchment, the edges of his form dissolving into fine grey ash. He thrashed, a final, horrifying spasm, his roar turning into a gurgling gasp, and then, with a final, unearthly wail that seemed to tear the fabric of reality, Vladislav Draculescu, the ancient predator, the modern charmer, exploded into a whirlwind of dust and shadow. The remnants swirled, caught in the sun's beam, and then vanished, leaving nothing but a lingering acrid smell and an eerie, profound silence. The Commune members, including Camilla and Daniel, who had stood frozen in their thrall, now staggered. Their eyes, though still vacant, flickered with a sudden, confusing awareness, like waking from a long, terrible dream. Some collapsed, others whimpered, clutching their heads, their centuries-old conditioning broken in an instant. Sofia stood panting, the aspen stake still clutched in her hand, the sun now fully bathing the devastated hall in its cleansing light. Her body ached, her wrist throbbed, but her spirit, though weary, felt profoundly, terribly, triumphantly alive. Eyes alight with a mixture of awe and profound relief, he looked at Sofia, then at the swirling dust where Draculescu had been, then at the dazed, confused figures of the Commune. The rising sun, now fully bathing the devastated hall, illuminated the ruined sanatorium, revealing the chaos left in the wake of the ultimate reckoning. The fight was over, the monster defeated, but as the golden light touched the faces of the newly freed, it did not bring immediate salvation. Instead, it unveiled the horrific cost of their liberation, vacant stares and trembling forms, the lingering fear in eyes that had seen too much, and the unsettling rapid decay already claiming those who had been too deeply touched by the shadow. This was not an ending, but a terrifying, uncertain dawn. The ancient evil had been vanquished, yet its tendrils of influence still snaked through the very fabric of their world, and the true extent of its devastation was only just beginning to unfold. For Sofia and Thomas, the battle for survival had ended, but the far more complex and enduring struggle for truth, for recovery, and for preventing the resurgence of such hidden horrors was now, irrevocably, beginning. Chapter 12. Echoes of Eternity. The dawn that followed Draculescu's fiery demise was not the glorious cleansing light Sofia had imagined. Hours later, the rising sun, now higher in the sky, only served to illuminate the true, grotesque cost of their victory within the shattered bones of the Sanguine Ascent. Sofia and Thomas moved through the dazed, shambling figures, each one a testament to the horror they had just overcome, their faces marked by a terrifying confusion, or worse, the unsettling signs of rapid, irreversible decay. Among them they searched for Camilla and Daniel, the silence of the freed more unnerving than any shriek. The air in the ruined courtyard still hummed with a residual malevolence, a metallic tang of ozone and old blood clinging to the shattered concrete. The hundreds of individuals, once the terrifying, unified Commune of Eternity, now resembled a macabre tableau of lost souls. Some collapsed to their knees, weeping silently, their bodies racked by a sudden, inexplicable weakness. Others stumbled aimlessly, their eyes wide with a terror that seemed to have no immediate source, merely a lingering shadow of subjugation. A few, particularly those more recently, turned, or less resilient, withered before their eyes, their unnaturally pale skin growing sallow, their fragile forms succumbing to the ravages of time that had been held at bay by Draculescu's unnatural influence. Sofia averted her gaze from these tragic cases, her heart clenching with a fresh wave of grief, and the bitter taste of a victory that felt more like a profound sorrow. "Camilla!" Sofia's voice, raw and hoarse, sliced through the stunned silence as she spotted a familiar shock of bright hair among the pale faces. Camilla stood near a crumbling fountain, leaning heavily against a cracked stone gargoyle. Her eyes, the same deep, still pools Sofia had witnessed in the obsidian mirror, now held a flicker of something new, bewildered, profound fear. Her skin, once ethereal, was now translucent, almost sickly, the faint blue veins beneath starkly visible. Her lips, usually vibrant, were chapped and pale, and her frame was terribly emaciated. Sofia rushed forward, Thomas a pace behind her, his gaze sweeping the chaotic scene with an almost clinical concern for the extent of the damage. As Sofia reached her friend, Camilla's head lifted, her eyes meeting Sofia's, and for the first time in what felt like an eternity, recognition sparked there. A small, broken sound escaped Camilla's throat, a choked sob that was more air than sound, and she collapsed into Sofia's arms. Camilla's body was shockingly light, a mere collection of bones and fragile skin, but the warmth of her touch, however faint, was a profound relief. "It's over, Cam," Sofia whispered, her own voice cracking, tears finally blurring her vision as she held her friend tight. "You're safe. We're safe." Camilla only clung to her, trembling violently, her face buried in Sofia's shoulder, a cascade of silent, racking sobs shaking her entire body. Nearby, Thomas found Daniel Hughes. The art expert sat huddled on the ground, his finely tailored clothes torn and stained, his intelligent eyes wide and vacant, staring at nothing. His face, once refined and sharp, was gaunt, etched with a profound exhaustion that seemed to pierce his very soul. He looked like a man who had woken from a nightmare, only to find its shadows still clinging to his conscious mind. When Thomas knelt beside him, offering a gentle hand, Daniel flinched away, his gaze darting around the courtyard, a primal fear in his eyes. He tried to speak, but only a dry, rattling gasp emerged, his throat apparently unused to forming words. Thomas merely nodded, understanding that the physical wounds were superficial compared to the unseen ones. As the sun climbed higher, more vehicles, official this time, finally began to arrive. Local Romanian police, followed by medical teams, navigated the treacherous mountain road, their initial bewilderment giving way to shock and confusion as they surveyed the scene. Hundreds of dazed, often terrified and sometimes rapidly deteriorating individuals, ranging from young adults to middle-aged professionals, were scattered across the sanatorium grounds. The police, accustomed to grim scenes, struggled to make sense of the vacant stairs and the almost ethereal quality of the victims. Medical personnel, faced with patients who exhibited extreme malnutrition, profound psychological trauma, and baffling physiological anomalies that defied easy diagnosis, moved with a controlled chaos. Thomas and Sofia, exhausted and emotionally drained, began the arduous, impossible task of offering some semblance of an explanation. Weeks blurred into a painful, slow succession of days. Camilla and Daniel, along with many other victims, were transferred to a specialized hospital in Bucharest, their recovery a testament to the resilience of the human spirit, but also a stark reminder of its fragile breaking point. Camilla, her body slowly regaining strength, remained largely silent, her eyes holding a deep, distant sorrow. She would often stare blankly, her mind seemingly miles away, trapped in a silent replay of unspeakable horrors. Daniel, once so articulate and passionate about art, had lost most of his words. He communicated mostly through gestures, a flicker of understanding in his eyes, the only hint of the sharp mind that still resided within the broken shell. Their wounds were not merely physical, they were etched into the very core of their beings, a spiritual scarring that would likely never fully heal. The doctors, baffled by the specifics of their conditions, attributed their symptoms to extreme malnutrition, prolonged psychological torture, and the effects of powerful, unknown hallucinogenic drugs. Back in London, Sofia and Thomas found themselves navigating a different kind of labyrinth. The cynical bureaucracy of Interpol, and national authorities. Seated across from grim-faced agents in stark, sterile debriefing rooms, they carefully constructed their narrative. Draculescu operated a highly sophisticated, deeply insidious cult, Sofia explained, her voice steady despite the tremor of truth beneath her words. He used his clubs and his art patronage as fronts, luring in vulnerable, talented individuals with promises of transcendence and eternity. He then subjected them to extreme psychological manipulation, hypnosis, and what we believe were potent custom-formulated drugs to break their wills and create a subservient commune. Thomas nodded, adding, "The physical deterioration, the pallor, the altered states of consciousness, all consistent with severe neglect, sensory deprivation, and chronic intoxication designed to erode identity." His whispering art was merely another tool in his arsenal of mind control. They presented their meticulously compiled evidence, Draculescu's illicit financial network, detailed records of property acquisitions, his connections to various shell corporations, and, most damningly, the comprehensive list of disappearances stretching across Eastern Europe and beyond. The sheer volume of victims, now hundreds strong, provided an undeniable impetus for investigation, even if the explanations stretched the limits of credulity. The agents listened, their faces impassive, jotting down notes. They latched onto the tangible, the money laundering, the human trafficking, the evidence of forced confinement. The supernatural elements, though obvious to Sofia and Thomas, were quietly reframed as the fantastical delusions of indoctrinated cult members, a convenient dismissal for a world unwilling to accept the monstrous truth. Sofia felt the sting of their skepticism, the implied accusation that she and Thomas too had been caught up in some shared delusion. But she swallowed it, knowing that the official channels would never grasp the full horror. Their victory wasn't about public validation. It was about saving lives and dismantling Draculescu's empire. The authorities launched a vast international investigation into Draculescu's holdings and associates, arresting several individuals connected to his legitimate businesses, all unaware of the true horror they had facilitated. The Carpathian Vale had briefly parted, but the world, in its pragmatic wisdom, had swiftly woven it back together, choosing a more palatable lie over an impossible truth. Somner's asterisk. Weeks later, the London autumn draped Sofia's apartment in a soft, grey light. She sat at her desk, surrounded by the organized chaos of her own making, stacks of notebooks, printouts, and half-empty coffee mugs. The clack of her keyboard was the only sound, a rhythmic counterpoint to the quiet hum of the city outside. She was writing her article, the most important of her career, and the most difficult. Her fingers danced across the keys, crafting each sentence with deliberate precision. She described Draculescu as a charismatic psychopath, a master manipulator who preyed on the disillusioned and the ambitious. She detailed the lure of the Carpathian Vale, the opulent settings, the hypnotic atmosphere of the Obsidian mirror. She spoke of cognitive erosion and induced suggestibility, attributing the victims' ethereal glow and changed demeanor to extreme cultic conditioning and a cocktail of designer drugs. But beneath the carefully constructed facade of conventional journalism, Sofia wove in the subtle threads of truth. She spoke of Draculescu's unnatural vitality, his eyes that held centuries of wisdom and a hunger beyond mortal comprehension. She hinted at the unseen influences that permeated his clubs, the cold, pervasive chill that seeped into the bones. She wrote of victims who returned emptied, their spirits like shattered glass, their memories fragmented as if parts of their very essence had been consumed. She used words like predatory grace and a will that devoured, allowing the reader's imagination to bridge the gap between psychological manipulation and something far more ancient and terrifying. She didn't mention fangs or reflections or aspen stakes or explosions of dust, but she carefully selected adjectives, adverbs, and metaphors that would make her readers pause, that would plant a seed of unease. She described Camilla and Daniel's long, arduous recovery, hinting at wounds that went deeper than any doctor could comprehend, at a light in their eyes that had been dimmed by something far more sinister than addiction. Sofia wasn't merely reporting a story, she was whispering a warning, challenging her audience to look beyond the rational, to consider the unsettling possibility that some monsters were real, and they walked among us, hidden in plain sight. She was a journalist, yes, but now she was also a reluctant guardian of a truth too profound and terrifying for mass consumption, forever changed by the horrifying dimension she had glimpsed. Which Darcy? Miles away, in his London study, Thomas Helmuth sat hunched over his ancient oak desk, the late afternoon sun casting long shadows through the stacks of books. His tweed jacket, usually a comforting second skin, felt heavy, weighted by the knowledge he now carried. The room, once merely a sanctuary of organized chaos, had become a command center for a silent war. On his desk lay a worn, sepia-toned map of Eastern Europe, liberally marked with red ink. Castelul Umbrelor was circled, the Sanguine Ascent highlighted, but now there were other, smaller circles, clusters of red, that marked known disappearances, whispers of strange occurrences, patterns that only Thomas, with his unique blend of anthropology and a grudging acceptance of the occult, could truly discern. He added a new classification to his mental taxonomy of threats: Winchates, Omnox, Metes, the ancient predator. His research notes, once filled with academic musings on cult psychology and historical superstitions, now contained first-hand observations of impossible speed, unholy strength, and the chilling truth of a sustained, parasitic existence. He meticulously cross-referenced folklore with modern reports, no longer dismissing tales of the undead as mere myth, but as fragmented accounts of a deeply cunning, highly adaptive species. Thomas ran a finger over the Carpathian Mountains on the map, a profound sense of validation settling over him, heavy as a shroud. His life's work, once relegated to the fringe, was undeniably confirmed. But with that confirmation came a heavier burden, the responsibility of knowing. He understood that Draculescu was merely one facet of a larger, ancient network. The victory at the Sanguine Ascent had merely decapitated a local branch, not eradicated the root. He carefully marked a region in the Balkans, then another near the Baltic Sea, his eyes glinting with a quiet, fierce determination. The world had returned to its slumber, but Thomas Helmuth, the unlikeliest of warriors, would remain vigilant, preparing for the next echo of eternity.
Thank you for listening to this Soundscape Books recording. We hope you enjoyed it. Please subscribe so you don't miss our new releases. Goodbye for now.